one of our unique time for us is our 4th council meeting this month. And I don't know if that's a record, but certainly has been for busy Tuesdays for all of us. This is update number 6 from our COVID team, our response team. We remain in a state of municipal emergency, very similar to the many of our other partner municipalities in York Region. This memo here provides, as we move into our 4th month of the COVID plan, it was municipal facilities were shut down on March 13th, I'll remind all. So we're now into month 4. We continue to provide services and programs with virtual and practices, and are actually have been quite effective at this point in time. The province has extended their emergency order until June 30th, and there is discussion that it might be extended even further into July. York Region moved into phase 2 of reopening, and I think now we can see some of the things like restaurants, hair salons, barber shops. I'll note, Councillor Foster, there was quite a lineup yesterday at the Aurora Main Street barber shop of men down the way. So it's good to see that everyone's now booking new appointments. Splash pads, community centers, and libraries will have permissions to open with new practices that are being reviewed by our staff team. In addition, we will be continuing to monitor the summer camp program situation, as again, they have been permitted, but with a number of conditional criteria that makes that all municipalities are reviewing at this point in time. Today we have some additional updates. We have an operating financial impact till the end of August, or essentially Labor Day, which we've looked out to, and we remain in a very strong financial shape, not requiring any municipal layoffs or mandatory shutdown days for the town operations. Again, not similar to many of our other municipalities, and I think it's indicative of our position where we've hired the proper amount of people for programming, and our strong financial position with no debt and other things that a lot of municipalities have as ongoing impacts. Chief Mackenzie has a team that continues to work on our recovery plan and update for municipal operations, and our Margot Beijing continues to work with our community on our economic recovery of our East Gwillimbury community as part of York Region. On that note, Madam Mayor, that's the general memo. There's 2 other reports today under COVID, so I'll pass it back to you. If there's any questions, we could move to the other memos otherwise.
Thank you very much. Are there questions of this memo? Councillor Foster, you have a question?
More of a comment, Madam Mayor. Thank you. CAO mentioned staffing and how we've handled that so far. And I think I alluded to this once before. I was actually asked by a resident how we were dealing with staff and who was working and who wasn't. I was able to say that, currently we had not laid anybody off. There hadn't been any interruptions. We had held off on hiring seasonal staff and that type of thing. Turns out that this person was asking because he works at a neighboring municipality, and he was actually out of work for a couple of months. Now, he did not say to me whether he was a full-time employee or a contract employee, or how his conditions worked out. But I just felt that maybe I needed some more information, and I was going to give the CAO a call. I thought I'd wait until this meeting to bring it up. So is there a possibility that we could have a look at a report, or have a report done up for us that just simply doesn't name any names or anything like that, but just simply says we have deployed, redeployed, so many people from one department to another, and we have people working rotating shifts and that type of thing, just so we have a bit of a better answer for the public. I think I was able to answer his questions by saying exactly as you said, Mr. Webster, that I think we're in a little bit of a different position. We're not holding a big debt. So it would put us in a little bit of a better position. But I'm just wondering if there could be a report, like I say, that kind of tells us how many people have been redeployed, who's working where, and what's happened to their hours type of thing, and just how we're handling that.
Mr. Webster?
Oh, Madam Mayor, we can provide an update on that report. Today's financial update touches on it a bit, but it sounds like a little bit more information on the human resources side. What I can assure you is all permanent full-time employees are either working in their existing role or have been redeployed to other areas where we would normally have contracted staff. We can outline that in an update memo in July and possibly make it available to members of council before the actual meeting, since it's a few weeks off.
Thank you. I just thought maybe a little bit more information. I kind of, I felt when I was speaking to the gentleman, I kind of glazed over a few things very quickly, and maybe there could be more information that we could have. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Persicini, you had a question.
Yes, thank you very much. I don't know if Mr. Webster can help me out here. I had a phone call. There's churches are allowed to do the opening the same way as any other when the time comes, and they're asking me, what about the halls downstairs? There's people who go to the Alcohol Anonymous. They've been meeting in the garage, doing the 6 feet thing. How is that going to affect it? Is that also going to be opening up down the road? So, I don't know. Basically, it's the halls. That they have gather special things. If they do the upstairs, the churches when the time comes. So how does it work for those clubs that they meet once or twice a week there, whatever?
Mr. Webster, I guess that would be referring to all of our facilities. While I think Councillor Persicini is referring to one in particular, I think it really spans right across all of our facilities that we have outside groups that are using them on a regular basis. Could you answer that, please?
I'm going to request, Madam Mayor, that some members of the COVID team, either Chief McKenzie, who's heading up the recovery program, Aaron Carmazon's looking at facilities, and Dean Horner would know the legislative capacities right now of what actually the legislation the province has as far as gatherings and what kind of criteria. Again, it might be a memo required to update, but I would ask that one of those three, or potentially all three, speak to Councillor Persicini's question.
I appreciate that very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Would one of the folks that I just indicated would like to outline an answer? But why don't we start maybe with Mr. Horner on sort of the legislative requirements of what the legislation says right now about gatherings, and if we don't have the information, we could always report back by memo. Okay?
Yeah, I can't give a quality answer today because it's not an issue that I've been seriously tracking, but the chief and GM Carmazon and I can certainly give Councillor Persicini the information he needs and make sure that's generally available to council.
Thank you very much, and I suspect that
Thank you.
other staff would probably have input into it as well. Thank you. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Crothers, Councillor Foster, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Item number 2, Administrative COVID Control Group Report. Would that be financial impact?
That would, Madam Mayor, and I would ask Mr. Marshall to speak to that report, and or Mr. Velchich.
Thank you.
So through you, Madam Mayor, maybe I can start off, and if Mr. Velch had any additional comments, he could add them after. This report just provides an update on our projections of what the impact of COVID on the town's financials has had. So we've gone to the end of August. The major change between June and August is the announcing of the cancellation of our summer programs. So that's had an impact of about $500,000. It's basically offset. The other change is the additional loss of revenue due to our waiving of principal and interest on outstanding water and sewer bills and tax bills. So that's about $80,000 to $100,000 that we're projecting, and that has also been offset. We've found ways to offset that as well. So in terms of our tax collections, the report, at the time of the report, we had collected about 85% of our tax collections that we had billed. Right now we're at 90% actually right now. So it's gone up a few percentage since the time we wrote the report. Our next set of final bills are going out in the next week or two, and we're proposing that we would offer financial relief to those who are having difficulties meeting those bills on a case-by-case basis. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Marshall. Questions? Councillor Crothers and then Councillor Crone. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. Thank you for this report. It's easier to understand. I have just two questions. One is on the penalty and interest for water arrears. So I'm looking at those lines, and first of all, the tax, penalty and interest on tax, it looks like we normally generate $333,000 in revenue for penalties and interest, but we've only collected $187,000. So there's a shortfall of $146,000. Am I reading that correctly? And then when we go to the water arrears, we normally collect $26,000 in penalties and interest, but for some reason this time we've collected more. I'm just wondering if you can help me understand that, or if I'm reading it wrong.
Through you, Madam Mayor. No, you're reading that correctly. We budget conservatively on what we expect to collect in terms of penalty and interest. And it just so happens that on the water side, we've collected more to date than we had anticipated through that budget to the end of August. So I believe that our budget amount is $50,000. So if you prorate that, that's how you get to the $26,000. So we've actually collected $37,000 in penalties and interest to date.
Okay, and I thought we were pausing penalties and interest.
So those collections happened before we paused.
Okay, that's great. And then my second question, if I may, Madam Mayor, is right at the bottom, the payroll-related COVID costs, no budget impact. Can you just explain that to me, please?
Sure, through you, Madam Mayor. Those are costs associated with staff that have been reassigned to work specifically on the COVID-related items. So, for example, we have a person who is dedicated now from our health and safety group specifically to work on COVID items. So we budgeted for his salary during the normal course of business, but now he's working specifically on COVID items. So we're attributing that cost to COVID. So that's what those type of costs are.
Okay, so these are people are being taken away from other duties. So the cost to us is that these people are not doing their regular duties. Instead, they're doing COVID. Okay, thank you. That answers my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions of Mr. Marshall? Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Crothers took the bulk of my questions that I was going to ask Mr. Marshall, but I had just one remaining. If you could just maybe share with us, what are the assumptions you're using about how many people we're anticipating we won't be collecting interest payments for? If we just get a sense of that, of what the underlying assumptions you're using when basing the calculations.
Through you, Madam Mayor. What we've done is we've taken a look at what we've actually collected, and we're using that as a base to project going out. In June, we had only collected close to 75 to 80%, so we used that as our assumption for collection. At the time we did this, we were close to 85%, so that's what we used. Going forward to the end of the year, we're using a bit less and more conservative of an estimate, just in case there's some things that happen that we're not aware of. And so we're using about 80% of our collection. And that's consistent with a lot of the municipalities we've seen in the region, anywhere from 70 to 95% collections. So we're right in the middle.
Okay, good stuff. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Councillor Morton, you're on the phone. I understand. Do you have any questions of this report?
No, because I've already gone through it with Mr. Valchich.
Thank you very much. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
Also move.
Thank you. Councillor Morton, Councillor Persichini, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. We are on item 3, and that is Community Parks, Recreation and Culture memo with our COVID report regarding programs and permit update. Mr. Karmazin, I ask you to take this one, please.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. This provides a status of our permits and programs to date. I should highlight that we are working with our sports groups to determine what some new schedules and guidelines may look like for a return back to each of their respective sports. And I should also update Council on a separate note that the Concerts in the Park series normally planned into July. We're planning that at the Stardust Drive-In Theatre, and we're working out some of the details, but there may be a delay with that series for a socially or physically distant type of event into likely early August. I'd be happy to answer any questions that Council may have related to the memo. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions? I'm not seeing any at this time. Oh, here we go. Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just wanting to follow up on the return to play guidelines for some of our children's and youth clubs. I'm just wondering, are we, given that we've redeployed some staff and we may be operating at a little bit of a lower capacity, are we going to be able to honor our permits for those clubs, provided that they're able to return to play? I know, for example, Ontario Soccer has issued a 77-page document, and it outlines their 3 phases of return. So if the EG Soccer Association wants to return to play, can we accommodate their permits and the maintenance of the fields that are required to do so?
Mr. Karmazin?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. We are working with all of the sports group, soccer included, to take a look at the return to the field schedules. And with that, then we would look at possible pullback on some of the redeployments or shifting staff to provide the required cutting and lining schedule for those fields. So absolutely, we will be looking at their schedules, and we will be resourcing in order to provide a service level to support their return to the fields.
Thanks very much.
Yeah. Are there any other questions for Mr. Karmazin? Seeing none, could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Roy DiClemente, Councillor Foster, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. We're at item D on our agenda today, and this is a statutory public meeting. It's a town-initiated official plan amendment for Highway 404 Employment Corridor Secondary Plan, Official Plan, Secondary Plan Study Area B-4, file number OPA 20.00. And I have some official remarks before we start this. And this is a statutory public planning meeting. And ladies and gentlemen, this portion of the council meeting is a statutory public meeting under the Planning Act. The purpose of the public meeting is to inform the public and obtain public input on planning applications received by the town prior to a full technical analysis being conducted by our staff. No decisions to approve or refuse an application will be made here today, and I'd like to emphasize that. There will be presentations from both town planning staff and the applicants on the development applications. Following these presentations, members of the public will be invited to offer their comments or concerns respecting the proposals. Submissions can also be made in writing. Then I will ask either staff or the applicant to answer questions related to the application. Once we have heard from the members of the public, I will ask members of council if they have any questions or comments. Your participation today is welcome, and by hearing all comments, we enable the making of informed decisions. It should be noted that a comprehensive report will be prepared by staff and presented at a future committee of the whole meeting, assessing the merits of the application before us and providing council with a recommendation on whether the proposal should be approved, modified, or refused. It is very important that the town receive the names and addresses of individuals having an interest in these planning applications. Therefore, if you plan to speak to council at this meeting, or if you wish to be notified of any future council meetings concerning the application being considered, you must complete the orange sign-on sheets and present it to the clerk. Under the Planning Act, the applicant or resident have a right to appeal any decision of council on planning applications to the local planning appeal tribunal. But you must verbally express any comments or concerns here today, or submit any comments or concerns in writing to the town before the plan is adopted or a bylaw is passed. The tribunal may dismiss all or part of an appeal made in respect to the application. This public meeting is being audio and video recorded for storing and broadcasting on the internet. Your name, address, comments, and other personal information is being collected and maintained for the purpose of sending correspondence relating to matters before council and creating a record that is available to the public in hard copy format and on the internet on an electronic format pursuant to Section 27 of the Municipal Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Questions about the collection of personal information should be directed to the town clerk. Also, I would like to note that there were 5 submissions that were received in reference to this item. They can be located on our agenda and our published agenda and page 114. And with that, I will now ask the General Manager of Development Services to begin with the presentation, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor and members of Council. As you mentioned, this is our statutory public meeting. We have a presentation. Just before I turn it over to the presenters, just for the record, as Madam Mayor, you mentioned, we did receive 5 written submissions. 4 of those are from the landowners and developers within the secondary plan. We've been working with them over the past year. They're all very supportive of the process thus far. And the preferred land use option, they have indicated a number of points that they want clarified with respect to road alignments and the configuration of environmental protection areas for the most case, in most instances, and we believe we can address those concerns. We've got policies in our draft secondary plan that'll address those concerns moving forward. And the 5th submission is from York Regional Planning staff. They're part of our technical advisory committee. We've been meeting with them as well, and we think we've addressed their concerns, and we'll continue to ensure we address concerns moving forward. I don't believe we have any members of the public who wish to provide verbal comments at this stage. So I will, at this point, turn it over to Adam Robb, our Senior Policy Planner, Madam Mayor. He will go over the public engagement process that we followed thus far. And then at that point, Adam will turn it over to Ms. Lorelei Jones, our principal consultant on this project, who will present in detail the secondary plan process and the preferred land use option. And with Ms. Jones as her the rest of her consulting team that will be able to address any concerns or questions that may arise. So I'll turn it over to Adam at this point, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you, Marco, and thank you, Madam Mayor, and good afternoon to all members of council. As mentioned, I will provide just a brief introduction into the Highway 404 Employment Corridor Secondary Plan project before handing it off to our consulting team to present on some of the more specifics regarding the draft secondary plan, which is presented for review today. The Highway 404 Employment Corridor Secondary Plan seeks to establish the detailed land use policies for the approximately 200-hectare area located north of Green Lane East on both the east and west sides of Highway 404 between Leslie Street and Woodbine Avenue. The secondary plan has been developed with extensive public input over the course of the past year and aims to guide future growth in a manner that is compatible and efficient, while of course optimizing the area's prime location as a gateway for the town and hub for future employment and economic growth. There have been various component studies, which I know Lorelei will get into, but they've been prepared for the secondary plan across areas of community design, land use, fiscal impact, cultural heritage, transportation, natural environment, and infrastructure, which all these studies have been used to inform the policies for the area and ensure that it is developed in a cohesive and orderly manner. At full build-out, the secondary plan is anticipated to generate close to 5,000 new high-quality jobs across a variety of sectors, which will balance the town's residential growth with new local employment opportunities and help contribute to the development of a complete community for residents. As mentioned, public consultation has also been a key cornerstone for the secondary plan's development. The project has had its own dedicated website since day one, and open houses have been held throughout each project phase to present information and receive community level feedback. As Marco mentioned, a technical advisory committee was formed with representatives from the MTO, the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority, and York Region, as well as internal staff across multiple departments, to provide comments at regular meetings as the development of this secondary plan progressed. A landowners group was also established with the over 20 plus landowners within the secondary plan area to have frequent meetings and allow for a continual stream of dialogue and information sharing and reciprocal feedback regarding the development of the secondary plan. As mentioned too, the statutory public meeting is a further opportunity to receive comments on the draft secondary plan before proceeding with adoption by town council at a future meeting. So with that introduction in place, I will now hand it over to Lorelei Jones and the consulting team to present further details on the draft secondary plan for review today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. There is a presentation that is accompanying my comments today, and as I understand it, the staff will be controlling the presentation itself. So we'll move to the next page, please. So just again, in sort of support of the indication that there has been public notice given for today's statutory public meeting on June the 11th and 18th. Notice was posted in the newspaper on June the 3rd. Notices were emailed to those who'd requested notification. Also on June 3rd, information was posted on the town's website under the public notice section, as well as the specific secondary plan project specific page. And on June the 1st, written notice was mailed to all of the property owners within the study area and within 120 meters of the study area. Next page, please. So as Adam was describing, this is just a map of the study area, the secondary plan area that we're dealing with. So you can see Woodbine is on the east, Green Lane is on the south, Leslie Street and 404 create the western boundary, and Mount Albert is the northern boundary. Uses right now are predominantly rural agricultural with some small amounts of residential and commercial uses within the study area. Next page, please. So the purpose of this study is to create a secondary plan based on a detailed land use study that's been undertaken, and to develop then specific policies that will allow for development of the area. And this reflects the requirements in the town and the region's official plan that this was a secondary plan study area. Next slide, please. This project started in July of last year, and it's been undertaken in 3 different phases. So the first phase was data collection and analysis. The second phase dealt with more of the detailed analysis for the various components of the study. And we came up with 2 different land use alternatives that were presented to the public and to council in April and May. We're now into phase 3, where we have developed the actual draft secondary plan, and we are now receiving public input into that. We'll be taking all of those comments, making some revisions, and then bringing the document back to council for adoption at a future date, as Adam had indicated. Next slide, please. Also, as Adam had indicated, there have been a number of technical studies that have been undertaken. So a transportation analysis has been undertaken by HDR, and we have Jonathan Chai from HDR is with us today and available to answer questions. Water and wastewater servicing and stormwater management were undertaken by WSP, and Martin Ennis is available from WSP to answer questions today. Natural heritage was undertaken by Natural Resource Solutions, and Katarina Richter is with us today. Cultural heritage was undertaken by Archaeological Services, Inc., and James Nielsen is with us today. Fiscal impact was undertaken by Watson and Associates, and we have Gary Scanlon with us today, and an urban design study and urban design guidelines are being undertaken by Brooke McElroy and Katie Black is with us today. Next slide, please. So we have put together a secondary plan vision for the secondary plan area, as well as guiding principles. And we have presented this vision to council in the past and to the public. The intent is to provide for a high quality, comprehensively planned employment area that provides a complete range of office and industrial uses, as well as limited retail uses. It's intended to support a diversified economic base, increase employment opportunities, and improve the town's vitality and resiliency. It's to take advantage of the area's prime location adjacent to Highway 404 and provide for enhanced access and connectivity. The intent is to create pleasant and comfortable streetscapes that encourage active transportation and support public transit. We want to ensure that it's a visually attractive area and also is sustainable in its design and development. And we want to protect the natural and cultural heritage resources for their merits and for enjoyment of future generations. Next slide, please. So this is the draft land use schedule that's been prepared for the secondary plan itself. As I indicated, there were 2 alternatives that were produced previously. The recommended option is fairly similar to what we had called option 2 previously. There have been some minor modifications to that. There have been some adjustments made to the natural heritage system, and based on some additional field work that's been undertaken since we put forward the draft secondary plan, it's anticipated that there may be a few further minor modifications to the environmental protection area that's shown on this plan. There are 5 land use designations that are proposed within the secondary plan area. And so now I'm just going to walk through a brief description of those different designations. So next slide, please. The first one I wanted to talk about is prestige employment, and it is intended to provide for light manufacturing, offices, research and development facilities, hotels, conference centers and convention centers, and accessory uses. Other uses that may be permitted within a prestige employment area subject to a site-specific rezoning include things like commercial schools, ancillary uses, and major health facilities only located west of Highway 404. The requirements at both the provincial and regional and towns official plan levels indicate that major retail facilities are not permitted within employment areas. And as a result, to ensure that we do not permit major retail facilities, we're recommending that there be a cap on the size of individual retail stores and Facilities that are located within the secondary plan area to a maximum of 600 square meters per use, except for automobile dealerships, and that on any individual site there not be more than 2,500 square meters of retail space. With respect to development within this area, we're proposing a maximum height of 10 stories, except for adjacent to Leslie Street, where we're proposing a maximum height of 6 stories. The maximum density recommended is 1.5 floor space index. And in a prestige employment area, we're not recommending that outdoor storage be permitted. Within the prestige employment area, we want to ensure a high standard of architectural design. Next slide, please. Within the general employment areas, this is where we may permit more heavy types of employment uses, such as manufacturing, fabricating, warehousing, distribution, utilities, transportation, trades, and constructions. We're also, again, allowing by site-specific rezoning that gives the town the opportunity to look at proposals in more detail, things like auto body paint and repair, commercial self-storage, and cement batching plants, as well as truck terminals. Within the general employment area, we're recommending a maximum height of 4 stories and a maximum density of 1 floor space index. Outdoor storage will be permitted within a general employment area, although there are policies that will require it to be screened and that there be restrictions on the amount and the location of the outdoor storage. There will also be requirements in terms of design within the general employment area, but the standards won't be as high as they will be within the prestige employment area. Next slide, please. The mixed business employment area is really intended to be the area where the ancillary uses would be located. And these are the kinds of things that do provide for offices, hotels, commercial schools, and the kinds of retail facilities that actually service an employment area. So would we be talking things like banks and printing shops and those kinds of things? Again, there are some ability to provide through site-specific rezoning, things like day nurseries, major healthcare facility west of Highway 404, and drive-through facilities. We've also imposed the same restrictions on retail and service commercial uses as was recommended in the prestige employment area of a maximum of 600 square meters per use and 2,500 square meters per site. In keeping with the town's current official plan policies, the recommendation is to restrict uses to 20% of the total employment within the secondary plan area. There have been discussions with the region with respect to this point, and their official plan does specify a maximum of 15% of the total area, not the employment itself. So we're having further discussions as to that particular policy, but the general intent is that ancillary uses will be restricted so that the focus of the uses within the employment area are on, employment generating uses like industrial and office uses. Within the mixed business employment area, we're recommending a maximum height of 12 stories, except adjacent to Leslie Street, where it would be 6 stories, a maximum density of 2 FSI, and a very high standard of design. Next slide, please. We haven't moved on to the next slide. Nope, we've gone backwards. Can we move forward to one more slide, please? There we go. Thank you. So we have one small institutional designation within the secondary plan area, and the purpose of it is to recognize the existing Sharon burying ground. So it's the existing heritage cemetery that's been designated under the Heritage Act. And there are policies proposed in the secondary plan that indicate that any development in proximity to the cemetery must respect its uses and provide for appropriate mitigation approaches, which address adjacent massing, setbacks, landscaping, and buffering. Next slide, please. We also have an environmental protection designation within the secondary plan area, which is intended to provide for forest, wildlife, fisheries management, stewardship, conservation, restoration, non-intensive recreation uses, and it is also to recognize existing legally established uses, including agricultural uses. Next slide, please. There are also policies within the secondary plan that recognize what's in the official plan, which is establishing a natural heritage system. So the schedule that you have in front of you has two different colors, the green being the core areas of the natural heritage system, and the core areas are intended to reflect provincial, regional, or locally significant natural heritage features, and the yellow, the supporting areas, are intended to include either locally significant features or linkages, which are important when you're creating a natural heritage system to provide for that connectivity. Next slide, please. So in terms of all of the areas that are within the natural heritage system are designated environmental protection. And as we've shown them on the plan that we were just looking at, the area includes vegetation protection zones and buffers around the actual features themselves. So they will appear a little bit larger than the actual feature because they do include those buffers. But we have recognized through policies within the secondary plan that the exact boundaries of the natural heritage system will be confirmed through the preparation of a site-specific natural heritage evaluation that will be prepared at the time of the development applications that come in. So there is another chance to be modifying and refining those boundaries of the natural heritage system. The policies also recognize that we have to address the Endangered Species Act requirements as we're moving through the development approval process. Next slide, please. With respect to the transportation network, this is an excerpt from a modified version of Schedule E within the town's official plan, and we are proposing to provide for additional collector roads within the secondary plan area in order to better service this. So the purple colored dashed lines within the secondary plan area would be major collector roads, and the blue ones would be minor collector roads. So you can see that the majority are major collector within the secondary plan area. We have also provided for collector roads that are sort of little stumps coming north of the east-west collector road west of Highway 404 that will provide for potential future connections to lands to the north, which are currently within the white belt area of the town. Next slide, please. So the intent of the transportation system within the secondary plan area is to provide for an integrated multimodal system that balances the expansion of new roads with cycling and pedestrian opportunities and future transit services. Minor revisions to the road alignment will not require a secondary plan amendment, and local roads are expected to be established through the community design plan process and then finalized through the actual development applications. All development within the area is intended to be designed to promote transit supportive land uses. And in addition, we're also proposing that trails be created within the secondary plan area. Some of them will be located along roads, and some of them are proposed to be located along the edge of the natural heritage system within the buffer area itself, not within the actual natural heritage features. Next slide, please. So there are, as I indicated, collector roads that are part of this, and collector roads are typically the responsibility of the town and the developers in terms of creation of these roads. And so in terms of looking at transportation costs that are going to result from the development of the secondary plan area, it's estimated that the town's contributions to those costs will be about $35 million, and that will include the Highway 404 flyover, that's identified in the regions in the town's official plan, and as well as east-west collector roads and the north-south collector roads, and the other collector roads that were identified on the secondary plan land use schedule, and the costs are illustrated on this page. Next slide, please. So in terms of servicing, the intent is that development will proceed on the basis of full municipal water and wastewater services. There are policies within the town's official plan that do provide for interim servicing for some uses, and that will continue to be the case for the secondary plan area. There have been detailed engineering and servicing work that's been undertaken already with respect to the preparation of the secondary plan, but additional detail will be required to be undertaken as part of the community design plan process, which occurs after the secondary plan has been adopted and approved. With respect to stormwater management, the plans will address the requirements of the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan and will include water quantity controls based on low impact development, water quality controls, and erosion control measures. When you look at the land use schedule for the secondary plan, there are 2 existing stormwater management plans, stormwater ponds, that were created when the 404 was built, but no new stormwater management ponds are being proposed throughout the rest of the secondary plan area. Next slide, please. So again, in terms of development of the secondary plan area, the town will be expected to contribute to the costs of that development through water main costs as well as through sewer main costs. The town's estimated contribution for water main is $13 million. About a third of that, or more than a third of that, is the Highway 404 crossing, as well as local water mains on Green Lane and other roads. The sewer main costs are estimated at $23 million, and that includes sewers along Green Lane and an interim force main and pumping station that will be required for the final stages of development within the secondary plan area. Next page, please. Some of the other issues that we're dealing with in the secondary plan policies deal with land use compatibility. So as I mentioned, there are some existing residential uses within the secondary plan area, and residential uses are sensitive to things like noise, dust, vibration, and other emissions from industrial uses. And so it's important as development proceeds that those be addressed. So there will be requirements for noise impact studies and air quality studies as development applications are submitted, and those are required to meet the requirements of the Ministry of Environment, Conservation, and Park guidelines. It will also be important to make sure that light intrusion is mitigated onto adjacent properties through the development approval process. Next slide, please. As indicated, we are doing urban design guidelines that have been prepared in support of the secondary plan, and those guidelines will be used by staff in reviewing development applications, and they do provide greater detail than the urban design policies that are being provided in the secondary plan itself. The intent is to encourage development that does reflect the role of this area as a gateway from Highway 404 into the town. And so, as I mentioned when I was talking about some of the land use designations, particularly prestige and mixed business, that we want to ensure that there's a real positive tone that's set as you enter into the municipality. Within the urban design guidelines themselves, the guidelines have broken the secondary plan area down into 4 precincts. One is along Leslie Street, one is along Green Lane west of Highway 404, another is along Green Lane east of Highway 404, and then to the north of that, the 404 area and proximity itself. And so there are specific policies and guidelines that then address each of those specific areas to make sure that we are achieving that high design and that we're recognizing sort of key locations and view corridors within the secondary plan area, that we have enhanced streetscape design, and that we do have a connected network of streets, trails, and open spaces that provide for good connectivity and active transportation opportunities within the secondary plan area. Next slide, please. So one of the important things about moving forward with the development is to make sure that it can occur in a fiscally responsible manner in terms of the various costs per outlay of infrastructure that needs to be developed. And so it's being proposed that development within the secondary plan area occur in phases. And we have identified 3 phases within the secondary plan. The first is proposed to be the lands that are west of Highway 404. Phase 2 are the lands that are east of Highway 404, starting down at Green Lane, up to about halfway between Green Lane and Mount Albert Road. And then the third phase would be the remaining lands up to Mount Albert Road. And the rationale or reason for the boundary between phase 2 and phase 3 is that in phase 2, it's expected that servicing of those lands will be able to occur by the way of gravity sewers. When we get further north, there will be the requirement for force main and pumping station. It will be an interim one that will be located at the northern end of the secondary plan area. And so it is proposed to be the third phase of the secondary plan development. Next slide, please. As I indicated, there will be these infrastructure requirements, and we do want to do them in a cost-effective and timely manner. And we also recognize that the landowners may be required to enter into private cost-sharing agreements among themselves to address the distribution of some of the costs of development. Next slide, please. So as Adam indicated, we're expecting somewhere around 5,000 jobs to be created through this secondary plan area. It will be distributed between the different types of land use designations as you see on your screen. And it's based on the assumption that there will be approximately 45 people and jobs per hectare of development that are occurring within the secondary plan area. Next slide, please. So it's estimated that there'll be about 3.6 million square feet of gross floor area when the secondary plan is fully built out. There's been a fiscal impact analysis that's been undertaken by Watson, and they've looked at both the revenues that are going to be generated from this development through both taxes and operating revenues, as well as the expenditures that are going to be required from the town in terms of operating costs and life cycle costs, in other words, to upkeep and maintain and upgrade the existing infrastructure. They've compared the revenues to the expenditures and have indicated that there will be a net positive contribution to the town's financial position. So in other words, there's a net financial benefit to the town through the development of this secondary plan area. Next slide, please. So as Adam had indicated, we're here obviously today to obtain input from both the public and council in terms of what's being proposed. We would appreciate if we could receive any additional written public comments by July the 6th. We are hoping to bring forward a recommended secondary plan back to council for adoption on July the 28th. Once council adopts it, it then goes to the region who will review it, and they're the ones that then give final approval to the secondary plan subject to any appeals. So that is my overview of the proposed secondary plan, and myself and my team are available to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions from members of council? Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to our presenters. It's probably, there probably aren't too many questions because this presentation is so thorough and complete and very much appreciated. I just wanted to, I was hoping perhaps you could address what changes were made between there were two preferred options presented to us previously. And this is sort of a modified second option that has been addressed and presented to us. What changes were made from the one that was presented to us previously to this one that we see before us today? Because I had made some notes on questions that I had at the time, and just wondering what's different with this one than the other one. Please and thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor. So there have been some additional areas added to the natural heritage system on this. Those were comments that were made by the Conservation Authority in terms of some specific areas that are sort of down in the southeast corner of the secondary plan area near Green Lane and Woodbine. There's been some relocation in terms of exact location of the trail up at the northeast corner of the secondary plan area, and also with respect to boundary over closer to Leslie Street.
Okay, thank you. One of the concerns that I had, and simply, these are sort of, it's a plan, but isn't that specific. I'm just wanting to know, do we have enough collector roads, and is the road network sufficient here for our needs? And I think before I had asked the question, you know, how many businesses are going to be here? Are these blocks of land really large that aren't connected with collector roads? Do we, or is this sufficient? And one of the points I made was that north-south collector road, whether it made sense to punch it out to Mount Albert Road or to have it turn towards Woodbine, and what could you conceivably, what kind of a business could you conceivably put up in that quadrant? Is there enough space for a large employer that we would want to attract?
So I'll start with the response, and I may ask Jonathan to chime in. As I indicated in the presentation, these are collector roads, and we are anticipating that there will be additional local roads that can be created through the community design plan as well as individual subdivision applications, but we don't show local roads on secondary plan level schedule at this point in time. So the intent at the secondary plan level is to allow for larger blocks if that is something that's desired, without breaking it up with too many roads, in case there are end users that come along that do require, for example, a 100-acre block. But certainly if a landowner wants to be proceeding with creating smaller blocks for smaller uses, they have the ability to come in with a subdivision application and the creation of local roads that would certainly allow for smaller parcels and easier access then to, you know, those smaller sites. So Jonathan, did you want to comment in terms of the northeast corner?
Yep. Hello. Just want to test and make sure that everyone can hear me.
We can.
Great. And thank you, Lorelei, and through you, Madam Mayor. With respect to the north-south collector road and how many collector roads are needed to support the anticipated growth in the secondary plan area, we conducted a detailed traffic analysis that found that one north-south collector road east of Highway 404 was sufficient for the efficient movement of vehicles, basically. With respect to the northeast quadrant, our analysis did find that a road connection to Mount Albert Road would be beneficial for traffic movement. However, it was not mandatory, I guess, for the functioning of the movements in the secondary plan area. It would make movements to Mount Albert Road more efficient, but we through further review and discussion with town staff, we did identify numerous technical challenges associated with providing a road connection to Mount Albert due to the grading, as Mount Albert Road, the opposite of elevates, goes down, I guess, under Highway 404, such that the land on either side of Mount Albert Road. Uh-oh. Hello? I think I had
Yeah.
Okay, I'm back. Such that the land on either side of Mount Albert Road is quite high. Like there's a berm, I think is a technical term. In addition to that challenge, there is the spacing between Highway 404 and Woodbine Avenue, and York Region requires at least 215 meters from Woodbine Avenue from other regional intersections. So that would put an intersection about 100 meters or so from Highway 404. And all of that land is under the Ministry of Transportation's what they call controlled access highway limits. And they, the approval of that intersection will be subject to their approval. And then the last key point there is the provision of a road crossing the environmental lands that NRSI identified in their report, and there would be additional issues with an environmental impacts associated with that road. So ultimately, we ended up making the recommendation to curve that road towards Woodbine Avenue, as shown in alternative 2 that was identified. But in order to maintain active transportation connectivity in the preferred plan, we've identified an active transportation connection which extends from the north-south collector road up to Mount Albert Road to mitigate the environmental impacts, but to provide the necessary transportation connectivity particularly for active transportation. So that hope that gives a
Very much so.
bit over.
Thank you very much. Very thorough. And I guess the real answer for me that really helped was these collector roads are sort of the big pieces of the puzzle, and then the local roads that come in with individual applications are really what creates that neighborhood or that neighborhood fabric for the employers. And just one final question. Obviously this is sort of a question that comes up with most secondary plans that I've been involved with, and that is, we've got individual landowners who are saying, well, I don't want you to put that particular collector road here. I don't want that particular piece of infrastructure there. I want it elsewhere. This is a high level plan, and there is the ability, once those individual applications come in and you start to get to a more granular level, to make some adjustments. These are not set in stone as far as where the alignment is. This is a suggestion. Just wanted to confirm that for those of us who get the calls from the stakeholders. I see Lorelei smiling.
Yeah, I will jump in and confirm that you are correct.
Thank you.
Are there other members of council with questions? Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and through you to all the presenters. Thank you for that. It was an excellent presentation, very thorough. I'm excited to hear the number that you threw out, 5,000 jobs, and I think that would be very welcome here in East Gwillimbury, not to mention the commercial tax base that it'll generate as well. So I think that's very exciting. And I was pleased to hear your recommendation about capping retail space in there so that we don't run into a similar situation I think Aurora is in the middle of right now, where they're having some prestige lands, employment lands, that's now being overtaken by retail. So I think that's a nice safeguard that you've added in there. But I'll throw this question out, and maybe it's unfair to ask, but this is really the easy part, is designing it all and setting it aside. It's attracting the businesses to come. What's, in your experience, what's been the best practices in doing that? Is it the developer that attracts the business? Is it the town that plays a role in it? Are there consultants that do this sort of thing? I'm very new to this, and I would be very curious to hear what the best practice that other municipalities engage in. Please, not all at once.
I noticed that Marco has put up his hand, so I'm assuming that he's the one who wants to answer that question.
Go ahead, Marco.
Can you hear me?
We can now, yes.
Okay, sorry, it's not, my mic is still showing that it's off, sorry. Yeah, Lorelei, you can jump in afterwards as well. But to Councillor Crone's question, so we've been fortunate because the landowners group has been involved since day one, since we started this about a year ago. So they're all anxious. I mean, our first step is, to establish a secondary plan, for council to give its blessing eventually, to set the policy framework. But we have been working with but you're right, the next step is then for the development industry to come forward with their specific development applications, based on the phasing plan or a certain precinct, stage at a time. We are also working with Margot Begine, our manager economic development. She's reaching out, she's taking a lot of calls. So there is some interest. I mean, council's aware of the auto mall, but there's interest from other employment opportunities who want to locate within this 404 corridor. So, and they're just waiting for the secondary plan to be approved. And I think we'll see some activity there with actual applications coming forward. Of course, there's still some work to do here because the infrastructure needs to be installed and paid for. But again, we'll continue to work with the region and the development industry to continue to move forward to get this business park up and running. And to your question about the minimum number of jobs, at 5,000, that is minimum. And in my experience, we're well positioned that it's full build out with some interesting employers will probably exceed that number when all is said and done.
Thank you very much. I think that Margot Beijing has some comments for us as well. Please go ahead. Are you there, Margot?
Madam Mayor, it's Mark Valchich, and I think Margot may have lost access there temporarily. So I'll just make a couple of brief comments. We're really excited about this plan. We're happy to have worked with Marco and his team and the consultants, and you'll recall from some of the information we've talked about recently that as we look at growth projections moving forward, although we've seen in our first phase of growth a large emphasis on residential population growth, as we move out into the future, and the 404 secondary plan is a big part of it, we want to see that balance change to see more of an emphasis on job creation and sort of that complete community development aspect. So we're excited to be a part of it, and we'll continue to work with the group to ensure that job creation is emphasized.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Margot there now with us? Mr. Webster.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. I as too wanted to provide some comment. I think this is probably the largest strategic decision or one of the largest for sure, that council will be making this term. When we had our orientation sessions, it seems so long ago now, but early 2019, I will remind folks that economic development and job creation just continue to rise to the top for all members of council. We've done a great job of attracting new residents and building new residential communities. I do remind council that when we looked at the Northern Six comparatively, how favorable Newmarket and Aurora are, as they both have major industrial areas providing high employment, high assessment, and a lot of jobs. And they're the targets we're trying to reach. Martin Ennis has hit the nail on the head in one of his comments here. Servicing of these lands is absolutely the priority. We've got an interim arrangement with Newmarket to use the Harry Walker system for the automotive campus, and the west side, but long-term servicing, and that's why right now with the our master plans moving forward, our planning horizon moving to 2051, under Mark Valchich, there's going to be a real coordinated effort to put all of these pieces together, work with the region, and get these lands serviced with the permanent solution. And we think that we could have a real vibrant employment corridor, and eventually linking to the Highway 404-400 link with another corridor along there. So, this is a real emerging area. Not only will we be a major residential growth center for many years to come, but we'll also be a major employment node for York Region.
Thank you, Mr. Webster. Are there any other questions, comments?
My apologies, Madam Mayor. I am here now.
Oh, very good. Go ahead.
My sorry through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, and my apologies to all for the connection issues. But yeah, I don't really have much to add beyond what CAO Webster said, but just to update members of council, we're right in the midst of doing a target industry assessment that will give us some really good data about where our workforce and sector strengths are. We know what companies are growing, and I think that's, to your point, Councillor Crone, that's how you build an attraction strategy that that fills these employment lands with viable businesses. We need to know who we are, what we're good at, and what companies make sense for this area in terms of our attributes. So that will be part and parcel of the updated economic strategy coming forward.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments? I guess just one from myself, that many times we talk to people out in the community who are traveling south to go to work. And most recently with the presentation of this project a few weeks ago, I've had a couple of comments from people who live in the community who are in a position of high level at companies themselves, and who are looking to move out of the downtown area to something a little more appealing to their employees. So I do think we even have people in our community when we talk about our economic development that may in fact have the ability to have a look at moving their own company into our area because they're living here already. So very exciting times. There's no other questions. Thank you very much to Adam and Lorelei and Jonathan for sorting out our infrastructure. And going to be a very exciting time for us moving forward with this for sure. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please, for presentation? Councillor Roy DiClemente and Councillor Persicini. Now, all in favor? That's carried. Do we have any public comments at this time? Anyone, any speakers? I'm not seeing.
None that I'm aware of, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you very much. We have passed that motion. Thank you to staff. This is a huge project for East Gwillimbury, and one that certainly will define who we are in later years for sure. So thank you. And with that, I will move on to item E on our agenda, which is deputations. And I believe we have 2 deputations at this time.
That is correct, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
Your first deputation is S. Daniel and D. Shaw, Media Relations, and Ms. Daniel is Director of Tiny Seedlings, making a deputation to Council regarding an overview of Tiny Seedlings and the announcement of a monetary donation towards the proposed Health and Active Living Plaza.
Welcome, ladies. Good to have you with us today.
Thank you. Great to be here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to read from my sheet that I prepared here as this slide presentation plays for you. So first off, we'd like to extend our thank you for your time and consideration. My name is Carolynne Shaw. I'm joined by my colleague, Shawna Daniel. Together, we represent Tiny Seedlings, a community initiative provided by United Soils Management, located in Whitchurch, Stouffville. USM is a long-time expert in the management of excess soils. We opened our doors in 2008 and began receiving approved material from all over the GTA. As intensification boomed, we took this opportunity to become a licensed facility and expanded our operation to include the allowance of acceptable fill from hydrovac operators and small source operators, including landscaping companies and pool companies, providing smart and environmentally sound solutions to both private and public sector clients. We've always believed in giving back to our community and have done so since day one. As we grew, we knew it was time to expand and provide more opportunities and engagement for the youth in our surrounding community. And this is where Tiny Seedlings stem from. We created a free, no-cost program for children and their parents as a way to give back to the community we operate in. I'd like to welcome Shawna to expand on Tiny Seedlings and what we do in the community. Thank you, Darlene. Over the last 7 years, the two of us as mothers to similarly aged children in our friendly town have created and established relationships within our community. We have done this with local businesses in featuring various ways our members can learn more and have immediate access to goods or services at no cost to these families. We continue to align ourselves with our first responders, including our local police department, fire department, and paramedics. We have been named the platinum sponsor to our live arts and theater venue, 19 on the Park, and most recently, our platinum sponsorship to our Whitchurch Stouffville Public Library, where we will additionally be featured as primary sponsor for the upcoming annual summer reading program in conjunction with TD Bank,
which anticipates 500 plus participants as kids aged anywhere between 5 to 14 years. We have launched numerous activities, both on social media and our website, which continues to grow in response to the 1,300 plus members we currently have and grows rapidly, especially at this time when families are eager to connect during a pandemic where education, entertainment, and social themes are so widely needed. We have become a household name locally for families who want connection to where they live and for their children to benefit from. We have provided necessary items to our local schools for various holiday drives, donated to our local food bank, provided scholarships in collaboration with our local high school for 4 lucky students in environmental and education studies, and created numerous annual events like our Halloween party, Shamrock Skate, movie nights at our designated venue we call our open air arena at our home site of United Soils Management at 9th Line in Bloomington. We would have been entering our 4th year of sponsorship of Dash for Diabetes, where we sponsored the entirety of kids' registrations and was named the TS 1K Run, where kids had a chance to not only participate, but really set goals for themselves by way of a chip reader that measured their distance and timing once they came to the finish line for a satisfying moment to cherish as memorable forever. We have honored our first responders parallel with our town for New Year's Eve bashes, sponsored many local sports teams, and more. We are proud to announce our title of ambassadors to our friends at Lake Simcoe Regional Conservation Authority as they journey through a massive rehabilitation project and have donated $100,000 towards their new and improved Scanlon Creek. We will shortly be introducing this announcement on our site with a link to the LSRCA directly for their educational components. Everything we do is geared towards learning, whether it a craft or activity, a healthy recipe, or a scavenger hunt. Education is key for us as mothers and the two running this organization we're both very proud of. To you, Darlene.
I'm sure you're all wondering why we're approaching the community of East Gwillimbury when we operate out of Stouffville. Coming from one small municipality to another, we feel we share similar roots and values. But ultimately, it comes full circle, as East Gwillimbury is home to our founder, Alec Cloke. Alec has proudly called Queensville home for several decades. As someone who strongly believes in fostering others, it only makes sense to bring the heart home. Sadly, Alec's wife, Marv, passed away earlier this spring. She was an avid reader and also involved in her community in many ways. This is where the library comes into play. Once again, I'll leave you in Shawna's capable hands.
Mayor Hackson and Alec Cloke's professional relationship over the years has seen many productive conversations. Today, I'm happy to announce that he wishes to donate the amount of $100,000 towards the new build of East Gwillimbury's Health and Active Living Plaza in the name of Margaretha Cloke, who was an avid book reader and lover of literature. We thank you for this opportunity. We look forward to journeying with you in this build and being part of this staple in East Gwillimbury's continued growth and development and success.
Thank you very much, ladies. Wonderful presentation. I'm sure that there will be questions. Members of council, are there questions of our two presenters here today? I'm not seeing any. I think what we have is a successful company that wants to make a difference in East Gwillimbury. I'm not sure if council got the intention that all the children have our membership. There's no cost for the membership. It's just a matter of making sure that they have a membership card and they can participate in any of the activities that take place. So it will certainly enhance our community, and I'm quite sure that after we are out of our pandemic, there may be people and families that are looking for different kinds of activities, and the price is certainly right for many of our young new families here as well. And thank you also for the donation to our new library. I know that it will make a huge difference, and I'm hoping that there will be a reading nook or an area that perhaps can have Margie's name on it.
That would be lovely.
I have Councillor Crone who has a question, and then Councillor Roy DiClemente. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, not a question, just more of a comment. Thank you very much for your generosity, and we appreciate your commitment to our community. And it's very well received. And thank you for thanks for doing that. Hopefully, you'll be an example of others to come forward. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think my initial reaction, and I'm normally quick to put my hand up to comment, but I think it was really just shock and surprise at the generosity that Mr. Cloak is showing to our community, and I wanted to recognize and acknowledge that. I'm a council liaison to our library board, and I know that our board will be delighted, quite honestly delighted to work with the family and with tiny seedlings to find an appropriate way to recognize Mrs. Cloak and her love of literacy and the intent for youth in our community as well. So I'm as a community member and as a member of council, I'm looking forward to working with you and being at future events. And thank you again for stepping up and coming to our community as well. Thank you.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions or comments from Councillor?
If I may, Madam Mayor.
Yes, go ahead, Councillor Morton.
I, like you, have known Alex and Mark for many, many years, and I had the opportunity of speaking to Alex last week, and I can't imagine anything better in recognizing Margie and to remember her than having her name on as we move forward, and for the wonderful donation that both of them that came forward in Margie's name. So many thanks to Alex.
We'll pass that on.
Yeah, he'll be very pleased to hear that.
Thank you. Councillor Crothers.
Thank you. I don't have anything new to say. I just want to echo what my colleagues have said. Such a generous donation, and it's going to be put to very good use. So thank you so much. And I also just wanted to say to Darlene, it's nice bumping into you again. And it's
Good to see you.
different. We've partnered before on good projects. So thank you again for being involved in this. Thanks.
Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'm sure you'll be in touch with our staff to work out the details, and we look forward to partnering with you to make a difference in our community. Thank you ever so much.
And thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, we'll talk soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Could I have a mover and a seconder for the presentation, please? Councillor Roy DeClemente, Councillor Foster, all those in favor, and that's carried. Thank you very much, ladies. Have a great day.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Item number 2 on our deputations is D. Alexander Planning, Inc., making a deputation to council regarding development services.
Thank you, Mayor Hackson. Are you able to hear me?
I am able to hear you, and I believe everyone else can. They are showing that they can. Welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mayor Hackson, members of council, and ladies and gentlemen. My name is Deb Alexander from Alexander Planning, and I'm representing Jade Holdings. They're owner of property located at 4894 Mount Albert Road. I wonder if we can get the air photo up from page 11 of the staff report, please. Thanks, Tara. I don't know if you can zoom into that just a little bit. The intent of this site plan amendment application is to permit the construction of an expansion to the existing office and a new soil dewatering plant to be located north of the existing vehicle storage building. The vehicle storage building is that white building you can see sort of in the southern part of the property. That's it. Now, this property is located on the north side of Mount Albert Road. It's west of Highway 48. It's just about 20 acres. It's got about 560 feet of frontage on Mount Albert Road. Of this 20-acre site, the disturbed area is just under about 5 acres. The balance is the storm pond, buffers, agricultural fields. All the proposed new construction would be limited to the disturbed area. The surrounding area uses include an asphalt plant to the west, clean fill site to the northwest, fuel truck storage, to the east, and a hydro transformer to the southeast with some forested and natural areas beyond. We've done a natural heritage evaluation. It was prepared by Golder Associates. It found that the proposed soil dewatering plant will not result in any impacts to the surrounding natural heritage areas or the key natural heritage features. This site is zoned Oak Ridge's Marine Countryside with a site-specific exception that permits a contractor's yard, business offices, and accessory uses. Now, to introduce Jade Holdings, if you're not familiar with them, they're a company that works in the construction industry. They do a lot of sidewalk curb rehabilitation, directional drilling for underground utility installations, and a hydrovac, a vacuum truck service. They currently employ 110 full-time employees in the town, and as such, they are one of the town's largest employers. Tara, if you could put the site plan up, please, page 12 of the staff report. And then if you can just zoom into sort of that action area at the south. There it is. Thank you. Okay, so the site currently contains an office that you can see and a stormwater management pond and some parking areas. The vehicle storage building is identified there. And if we can back out just a wee bit, Tara, the proposed site plan amendment would permit 112 square meter expansion to the west side of that office. You can see that in the hatched area. And out a little bit further, Tara, please. I want to see that. Yep, there it is. There's the soil dewatering plant up at the top in the hatching. So this site plan amendment will also permit this 1,300 square meter structure north of that vehicle storage building, and that would house the proposed soil dewatering plant. Now, a minor variance is required to permit the increased GFA. That application has been filed and deferred pending council's approval of this proposed site plan amendment. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the soil dewatering plant and the operation itself. So the proposed soil dewatering plant is an accessory use to the existing contractor's yard. It will create an additional 10 full-time jobs for the town, bringing us up to about 120 full-time employees. The vacuum truck operation involves the use, if you're not familiar, of high-pressure water to excavate clean, source-tested soils from various construction sites. That soil and water mixture is then vacuumed back up into the tank on the back of the truck, and it's carried away. Now, currently, all of those trucks, there's 22 of them at the moment, are dumped at various approved fill sites, and all the excavated soils and water as well, all the excavated soils as well as the water resources are all lost. The proposed soil dewatering plant would allow separation of the soils and the water to allow reuse of both of those resources. And we anticipate recovery rates of about 70% of those materials, which is really good. The ability to sort the soil and recapture the water and soil resources for reuse is a more environmentally responsible process as compared to what happens now, which is the routine dumping of the entire vehicle contents into a landfill. Not landfill garbage, but landfill as in the soil operations like we saw with tiny seedlings in their previous presentation. Now the process involved is the vacuum trucks, the proposed process, the vacuum trucks would come back to this site and they would dump into a hopper, which is a concrete tank. The material is carried by a hopper across a series of shakers. They would remove most of the solids from that water, and then the water is further processed in a centrifuge, which would remove more of the soils from those waters. Then we can take that recovered water and return it to the trucks to use at the next job site. All the recovered soils would be dried and piled up inside this proposed building, ready to be trucked back out as clean fill to sites or construction sites for reuse as backfill. This whole process only takes about 24 to 48 hours. So this process would generate minimal increases in traffic. So right now we've got 22 trucks coming in, back trucks coming in. That same number of trucks will still come in, but the difference is that they'll be coming in full and they'll be emptied onto this site rather than being emptied elsewhere. The plant then would dry the soil, process the water, return it to the truck, dry the soil, and generate about 4 to 6 dump truck loads of soil for reuse elsewhere. Those 4 to 6 dump truck loads is the only increase in traffic that would result. This technology is not new, it's used elsewhere, but other sites those other sites all have access to municipal water services, so they're recovering the soils, but they're dumping all the water. With this plant, AJ Vac Works will be the only company in the industry to achieve the environmentally responsible recycling of both its soil and its water resources. Now, the Ministry of Environment, Conservation and Parks has a new regulation, OREG 406-19, that deals with the management of excess soils from construction projects. So the proposed soil processing operation would require approval from the ministry through an environmental compliance approval. So prior to executing the amending site plan agreement, the owner will make the application to MOE for that environmental compliance approval. As part of the process, the ministry process, the town would have the opportunity to review the application and provide comments or raise any concerns and be able to ensure that this proposal is not in contravention of your fill bylaw. So we've reviewed the town staff report and we're in agreement with the recommendations, and thank you very much, staff, for all your hard work. We appreciate it. If council has any questions or anyone else, members of the public, I'm available to answer the questions. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Are there questions from members of council? Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is around truck traffic. I don't see any issues with this plan, I don't believe, other than a couple of questions to do with the truck traffic. When it says there are 22 vacuum trucks that are out of that site, so we have to assume they leave in the morning and they come back at night. Plus the dump truck loads indicated that would be the only extra traffic. My question is around the fact that I would assume there's times when those trucks are on multiple jobs in the same day. So that would increase truck traffic where they would come back to the yard, dump, refill with water, and head out to another job. Just wondering how often that might happen, and would we see a significant increase in truck traffic just for that?
Typically, can you hear me still?
We can. Thank you.
Typically, the trucks leave in the morning and they come back in mid to late afternoon. They do, currently they dump off-site. My understanding is that they still come back to the site to get refilled with water, so we're not generating anything extra. The truck traffic would remain exactly the same.
Councillor Foster.
No, that's a good point. That's exactly what I was looking for.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, through you too. I think Mr. Ramuno, General Manager Ramuno, this is, first of all, I'm a little pleasantly surprised to hear that 110 employees in our own backyard of Ward 3. So I'm what a nice surprise, and they want to add more to that. So I'm really happy to hear about that. Mr. Ramuno, just if you could answer for me, have there been any objections from the neighbors around this request? And B, I guess my second question would be the region, Lake Simcoe Conservation Authority, have not raised any concerns, and we are, I presume, giving our consent contingent on Minister of the Environment signing off. If you could just answer those questions for me, I'd appreciate it.
Certainly, through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Crone. No, that's true. So we have circulated the site plan application. It's an amendment to the original site plan application to allow this expansion and the soil processing facility to the York region. They've signed off on it. They've got have no issues with respect to the existing access which will be used. And the Conservation Authority has also signed off on this. I'll just add, I think Ms. Alexander may have mentioned that they had prepared a natural heritage evaluation that we reviewed. Conservation Authority reviewed it. The expansion and the new building is all happening within sort of the area that's already developed. It's a 20-acre site, so it's all happening within the small front portion of the site. So there's no disturbance, no tree removal, no disturbance to any of the natural features that exist further north. And in addition, this type of industrial operation is permitted in our official plan and zoning bylaw. Yes, they need a variance to go beyond that minimum gross floor area, but it's also a permitted use. And the expansion is permitted under the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan as well. So we've reviewed that in the context with the Oak Ridges Moraine Conservation Plan. So if, and again, to your last point, the two preconditions that we've attached are that prior to executing, if council adopts the report, prior to staff executing the site plan agreement, what has to happen is they need to seek and get their approval from the Ministry of the Environment on that environmental compliance approval, as well as the minor variance application.
Okay, and just to be clear, there's been no objections from neighbors?
True, we haven't received any concerns from any of the surrounding neighbors. Correct.
Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor.
I'd remind council also that this is in relationship to item H3, and there is a report that when we move to development services that staff could answer questions from our end of the report. I think I saw Councillor Foster's hand up.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. And I can wait until we get to H3 if you like, but this is not a large question. If you want to just let me go ahead with it, your call.
Go ahead. We have the presenter still with us.
Actually, I think this is more for Marco. So if this goes to the Ministry of the Environment and the environmental compliance approval is done, is that circulated to us as the plan moves forward, or is it only circulated if there's an issue, that type of thing?
Through you, Madam Mayor, no, that's a good point. As part of that application, the ministry will request comments from the town. So we'll also have an opportunity to provide our comments on that request, and we'll certainly provide council with an update on how that process is going prior to executing the agreement.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from members of council?
Just a comment, Madam Mayor.
Go ahead, Councillor Morton.
Because I drive on the Mount Albert Side Road a number of times through the day and through the week, I have seen the trucks coming in during the afternoon, as Ms. Alexander was saying, and I'm actually wondering many times exactly what it was that they did with these trucks, because when they came in, they were all really clean. It looked like they just run them through car wash before they brought them home, and they keep the property absolutely wonderful. And I have asked a couple of the neighbors if they have any issues with this group and everything else, and they said no, they're very, very good, and they keep the property clean, and they have no issues at this point. So I think that as we move forward, it's a wonderful idea on what they're doing, and I look forward to learning a little bit more about it when they, if and when they get approved to move ahead with this.
Thank you, Councillor Morton. Any other questions from members of council? I'm not seeing any. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Foster, be it resolved that the deputation made to council regarding item H3, Development Service Planning Branch Report P 2020-15 Site Plan Amendment Application AJ Jade Holding Inc. 4894 Mount Albert Road, file SPA 20.01 be received. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Thank you for your presentation, Ms. Alexander. We appreciate it very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. We will move to item F, and that is a Joint Emergency and Community Safety Services Corporation Services Update Smoke Alarm Program. Chief, I believe that that you're going to be a part of that. Am I correct?
That's right, Your Honor. Thank you very much. Before I turn this over to Captain Davidson, I wanted to highlight and not say too much, but the Fire Prevention and Protection Act requires that every municipality in the province has a smoke alarm program, and one of the challenges that each department has is every year going out and making sure that those smoke alarms are functioning and they're maintained and they're in the right places. So we try to find new and different ways. Well, I'm happy to say that this is a project that's been a long time coming, several years in the making, and but it's finally come to fruition, and it's because of the work that the Fire Prevention Division and the Public Education Division with ECSS and the work that they've been doing with the corporate services. It's been a fantastic collaboration, and we've got some results here. We've got a great tool now to put into their toolbox. So with that, I'll turn it over to Captain Davidson, and she can set up the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you, through you, Madam Mayor. Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council, and special guests. Thank you for giving the East Gwillimbury Emergency Community and Safety Services and our amazing Information Technology Department the opportunity to work together on this amazing project. Ontario Fire Departments are mandated, as Chief Mackenzie said, and responsible for establishing a program in the municipality that must include public education and the front line of defense with respect to fire safety and certain components of fire prevention. This is mandated under the Fire Protection and Prevention Act. East Gwillimbury, for many, many years, has had a smoke alarm program that goes door to door, that our fire crews attend to houses to locate, test the smoke alarms and CO alarms in each and every home and ensure that they are all in good working order. Until now, this is a pen and paper initiative. About 4 to 5 years ago, we took Carolynne on a roadshow to Peterborough Fire and Georgina Fire to see examples of what other departments are doing within their programs to make it easier and save time, with data entry and showing results through key performance indicators. With this year's budget being approved, we were able to have Julie and Carolynne work on this program for us. Working with this amazing team, our vision and dream is shaping into the reality. We not only have saved and shaved 4 to 5 months off of our workload with this new program, we are one step closer to ensure that the residents of East Gwillimbury are safer than they were yesterday. Thank you, and with that, I will turn it over to the team, through you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. We have Julie and Carolynne with us.
Thank you. I'm going to be sharing my screen now. This is the smoke and CO alarm survey app we have created. It is in the style of several other apps that are currently available to staff on the town LMS site. It has many familiar tools that they would have used in other apps. For example, the legend that they can turn on and off, a layer list for layers that you can turn on and off, bookmarks to zoom into different parts of the town. The map is completely interactive. They can pan and zoom around. There is a measure tool if interested in creating any measurements. Apologies, there's a little delay. I had a storm come through just recently. They can also search by an address. If you start typing in an address, it'll auto-populate with a list of matching ones, and it will zoom to that location on the map. We will turn on all the address points so you can see the results. Your search result is highlighted. So any users wishing to start a survey would select an address, and this window comes up with the address listed and a link. They would click this link and be prompted to open the survey form. What you see on the form is the first 2 questions on the form are automatically populated by the address that you selected. And then the user would just continue to scroll down and start answering questions. Many of the questions are, that you don't have to type in, so it helps to speed up your entry. The time is extracted from your device. You can change it if you like. And you would proceed to start answering more questions. You would indicate which station you belong to, and then pick your name from the list. If you picked a different station, the pick list would change. So we'll just try one example to show you the complete process. The pick lists help to speed up data entry and prevent things like spelling mistakes. The next question you see is what's called a conditional question. So depending on how you answer this question, it affects what you see on the rest of the form. So if you did not make any contact with anyone at that address, you'll see a whole block of questioning disappears. If you had selected yes, that would remain. So for this example, we'll just try a very simple one. No contact was made because there was perhaps no answer. There's a section for additional comments and educational information. I'm just going to point out here that there's a little red asterisk next to most of the questions. This indicates it is a required question. It won't let you complete this form unless you answer it. So I'm just going to give you an example. We'll leave this one blank and try to submit it. And you see it's prompting you that you must answer this. So we'll enter a check and we will submit our survey. If we return back to the map, you will see now there is a new symbol at that address. And if we take a look at the legend, that is the no answer result that we put into the form. So we can try another form with maybe a different result. And start filling it out in the same way. The form questions were developed based on collaboration with Nicole and Shawna. And in this example, we're going to say you made contact with somebody at that address. So you would expand this questioning, and perhaps you spoke to the occupant. If you have their name, you could type it in there. And perhaps that occupant said no, inspection is permitted. And you can see this is another conditional question. So if they did not permit an inspection, did not allow you in, this block of questioning will go away. So then you would say you were refused entry, any additional comments if you like, and we will send that survey. And you can see back on the map, now this one is symbolized differently to indicate it was a refused entry. We'll try one more example where they were permitted to do the survey. And you can see the additional questions that they will go through. So we made contact with the owner and the inspection was permitted. So now you will proceed into the inspection questions. They are separated into different groups, as you can see. So if I start going through the questions, here you can enter what you observed during your inspection. So for an example, there was one working smoke alarm, one was tested, perhaps some batteries provided. Perhaps they needed to install another smoke alarm. You can indicate what type it was, the power supply. If it was installed, describe where. I'll say for example, and some additional questions. Was the smoke alarm relocated? Was it lowered level of detection? So that's for all of the smoke alarms. Then we will proceed to questions about the CO alarms. Perhaps there was one was tested. So there's one working one. Perhaps more batteries were provided, and perhaps another one was installed. Where it was installed in the house. if it was relocated, if a deficiency notice was issued, and if the alarm was required in the house. The third section refers to the guide light program. So questions about if there was a guide light installed, we'll say yes, where it was installed, and was tested. That is the bulk of the questions. There's a few more if you wanted to indicate if there's any other concerns that were noticed. If you select other, you can type in a description. If it doesn't apply to from the pick list, you can describe it there. There's a section to enter a date if a follow-up inspection date is needed, and if they signed a waiver. So in this case, since the inspection was completed, the status will be accessed, and we will send this survey. And again, if we go back to the map, you'll see now there is a blue dot on the map to indicate the status of that survey. So this can be used by staff in the field on a mobile device or on a desktop. Right now I'm just using it on my desktop, and that is the survey form component. The other tool we've prepared is a dashboard, and this is how that looks. So the data that we just collected will show up automatically. I'm just going to refresh the screen. So what you will see is that those 3 that we did will be added. There was 3 originally from ones that I tested earlier today. So the 3 that we just went through are added. So now there's a total of 6 conducted today. And there's some visualizations of these numbers you're seeing for 2020 are just sample numbers. They're not actual surveys that were completed. These were just done to test this app. But you can see how it can be displayed in different ways as a count or as a graphical depiction. The other thing we've included in this dashboard is several tabs along the top where you can look at previous year's results. These were compiled from information received from Nicole and Shawna. And this is all of the 2019 survey results. And you can see how certain statistics are displayed in different ways by a count or by a bar graph and with some numbers. So you can get a quick look at some of the results. And we go all the way back to 2014. This is 2018's results. And 2017. 2016 and 2015. And you can see how in earlier years that there was maybe less types of information collected, but still showing all of the counts. So this is year by year, and we have another tab at the top where we compare each year all at once. So the numbers across the top are the total number of surveys year over year, with the little indicators on if they've gone up or down from the previous year. Another tab along the top is the call analytics from 2019. So not survey information, but just to show you can bring in other information in this environment. So this is all of the calls from 2019 that we mapped. And I think that that's about it.
Thank you very much, Julie. That congratulations to both of you. It's quite remarkable. Thank you very much. Questions from members of council? Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a comment more than anything. I think I need to start by saying hello to Captain Davidson, which is Shawna to me. It's been a little while since we spoke. But this looks like a great step forward for the program and data collection all over the emergency services. What I'm thinking is that maybe somebody could comment. This looks like also a tool that could be used for future public education programs. I'm thinking that If you look at it and you find that you have a lot of no answers, then that's going to tell you that you're likely going to have to try a different time of day or something along that line. And if you see a lot of refused entries, to me that would indicate that more public education is going to be required as to why you're out there and what you're actually trying to do. I'm just wondering if my thoughts are on the right level.
Absolutely, Councillor Foster. We have to kind of think outside the box these days, especially in the pandemic that we're in, to try and get our messages out, whether it be through social media, through newspaper, through door to door. And with us being the type of community that is a community with our neighbors, we have to definitely take a look at that and see how we can get the messages out. Our number one is usually starting with the children, because they can go home and pester their parents to, check their smoke alarms and do their home fire escapes and that sort of thing. But we definitely have to see, we are working with our community risk assessment to see where our areas of need are and making sure that we're able to connect with those residents.
Very good. Thank you. Any other questions, Councillor Foster? You're okay?
No, that's good. I can just add to Shawna's phrase there. Over the years, when I did have the opportunity to do some public education, I used to get a large kick out of sending kids home to tell their parents that they would not go to bed until the smoke alarms were checked in the house. I don't know how popular I was with the parents, but it was a way to get that message across. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Not a question, just a comment. I think this is yet another example of a project that I think could be useful to our N4 partners at the very least, and certainly would be worthy of consideration for some municipal best practices and maybe even some awards like we did with our development dashboard. I wanted to commend our staff for putting this together. I think this is a tremendous accomplishment, and I wanted to congratulate them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from members of council? Seeing none, could I have a mover and a seconder for this amazing presentation? Councillor Roy DiClemente, Councillor Foster, all those in favor, and that's carried. Thank you very much, ladies. Job well done. We are at item G, Emergency and Community Safety Services. I have no reports at this time. Chief, do you have anything to add to item G?
Your Honor, nothing more to add, but happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions of the chief at this point? Seeing none, we'll move along to item H and development services with Mr. Ramuno in the chair.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The next item is the memo in response to a deputation that the council received back in May regarding the status of the Lake Simcoe Protection Plan review. So we just wanted to provide council with an update. I mean, the province is mandated to conduct a review of the plan every 10 years. They're in the midst of doing that now. They are working with the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority. We contacted the Conservation Authority. The process has been somewhat delayed due to the current situation, but public consultation will occur with the municipalities and the Conservation Authority. And we expect an update from the province on the update on the plan in the fall of 2020. So staff will report back on any changes to the plan for council's information. So at this point, my recommendation to council is release this information memo. There's no need for council to pass a resolution. We will report back to council in the fall when we do see an update from the province.
Thank you. Any questions of Mr. Ramuno? Seeing none, could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Crothers, Councillor Crone, all those in favor, and that's carried. Item number 2. Go ahead, please.
Again, through you, Madam Mayor, this is another memo that's associated with a bylaw on your for council's enactment later on, a part lot control exemption bylaw. It's the Wingfoot development in the Holland Landing East area. Again, another standard practice here. It's to allow for the creation of 15 townhomes that are currently under construction just off of Silk Twist Drive.
Thank you very much. Questions of Mr. Ramuno? Seeing none, could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. And seconded by Councillor Crothers. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Mr. Ramuno.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The next item is the site plan amendment application, AJ Jade Holdings. We heard from the owner's planning consultant who provided a presentation, so I don't think I'll need to get into any details of the specific plan. She did a good job in outlining. But what's before council this evening is really the request for amendment to the site plan to allow for the expansion to the existing contractor's yard, to add a additional office space, but as well as to allow another self-enclosed building to allow the soil processing of those soils coming from those 22 vac trucks on a daily basis. We've conducted our review. The Region and Conservation Authority have signed off, as I mentioned earlier. The Oak Ridge and Marine Conservation Plan does allow this type of development and expansions of these operations. Our official plan and zoning bylaw also allows these type of operations in the rural area. For council's consideration, we've identified a number of conditions. Some of them are typical for site plan applications. The two key ones here are they require approval from the Committee of Adjustment to allow the expansion beyond the 500 square meter in gross floor area. The other one is the condition that we've imposed that they apply to the Ministry of the Environment for an environmental compliance approval to allow the operation to proceed. So if council considers and adopts the report, we will hold off on execution of the site plan agreement and any building permits until the applicant receives the environmental approval from the Ministry of the Environment.
Thank you very much. Questions from members of council? Councillor Crothers, then Councillor Roy DiClemente.
I think your last line pretty much answered my question, but I just want to check the new EPA regulations that are going into effect in July. I would prefer not to have this all approved until July, just so that they don't end up on the old regulations. But they still have to go through another hoop before it's finally approved, and we're at the end of June. I'm assuming this will get final approval in July, and so they will be under the new regulations. Just want to make sure we're not creating a loophole because we're still in June.
Through you, Madam Mayor, no, you're correct. The July 1st, it would be mandatory that they have to apply for the ECA, but based on the condition that we're imposing, it is a requirement that would be coming from council if you adopt the report. Yeah, it's a precondition.
Thank you. Okay, good.
Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you. Just to clarify then, the precondition, further to Councillor Crothers' question, the precondition that we've put into this refers to the new regulations, so it actually will reference those new regulations that are effective July 1st?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, thank you. So some of my questions relate back to the fact that I was part of the original site plan amendment and some of the restrictions that were placed on this particular property owner. Over the years, as I have engaged with this proponent, I've always said, and through you, Madam Mayor, this is a question more for Mr. Molinari's area, that so long as my technical staff and our engineering staff were satisfied that environmental protections and precautions were in place, that I was comfortable moving forward with the expansion. And so I just wanted to hear, once again, it's in the report, but I want to hear once again that staff are comfortable that there are controls in place to permit the expansion and the appropriate environmental precautions are being made.
Thank you. Mr. Raguno?
Yeah, I see Mike wants to speak as well, but through you, Madam Mayor, that's correct to Council Roy De Clemente. Our GM, Mike Molinari's, has been involved, and so is the staff in this, and they've signed off on the condition. And so we worked on imposing that, drafting that condition together. And we do have sign-offs from York Region and the Lake Simcoe Region Conservation Authority as well.
And if I may just further, if we move forward with this, this employer will not be in contravention of our fill bylaw. Correct? They would still be in compliance with our fill bylaw?
Perhaps I should ask Mr. Molinari to, I believe he's on our call, if he could join us, perhaps he could answer that question rather than Mr. Ramuno.
Thank you.
Mr. Molinari, are you there?
Yeah, certainly, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
And yes, we're quite satisfied with the oversight of the MECP and going through the ECA process, that the site's going to be governed well, and it will be looked after quite well with respect to the environment and the custody of soil, et cetera, in that area. And I think the presentation today gives a pretty good comfort level as to the work that they're going to be doing and the sense of ownership and looking after the environment through the process with reuse of both water and of the soil. I think that the reuse of the water is actually a nice addition to the overall program. So I think on that basis, it is something that we would certainly be supportive of.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. This is reassuring to say the least. I'm happy to hear that the Oak Ridges Moraine legislation permits the expansion of existing facilities, and I can say that I know over the years that this property owner has invested heavily in making the site look appealing. They've planted trees, and I think it speaks well for them when their well-marked trucks are traveling Mount Albert Road on a regular basis, and yet we don't have any negative, or at least I haven't heard any negative comments or connotation. And to think that we were surprised that they employ that many people. I knew they were a key employer, but to think that a facility that modest a facility is employing that many people, I'm happy to see this move forward. It's been a long time in coming. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Molinari, are you still there?
I am, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. I just was going to ask council if there were any questions, whether it was yourself or Mr. Ramuno. I'm not seeing any. I just had one, and I would think it would be for yourself, is a follow-up ongoing inspections that do take place in operations like this. What kind of frequency would that take place?
In terms of the town staff looking after this, in terms of inspections, well, we frequent that area regularly to begin with. Mount Albert Pit's not far away. And it's a site that we can certainly keep our eyes on as we do our regular patrols through the area. And I just did want to comment. I didn't answer the question with regards to whether our fill bylaw applies. And actually, because the operation's mainly handled indoors, our fill bylaw doesn't really fit well within the parameters of this particular operation. So it's actually very well suited for the MOE to be looking after this one through the ECP process.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions, could I have a mover and a seconder, please?
So moved, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Crone and Councillor Morton. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much, staff. We are just approaching item I, legal counsel and support services. We have been just over 2 hours sitting, and I'm wondering if we could take a 20-minute break. It's my clock says 10 after 3, and we would be back at 3:30 for a stretch, etc. So with that, we will take a break. Thank you very much. Welcome back. We are on our agenda for item number I, which is legal and counsel support services. And Mr. Horner, I believe you've been working on this one.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This is really a joint project. Mr. Clerk has done the heavy lifting with the Director of Communications, but what we're really proposing here is a new community flag raising policy, and the thinking is that we can better accommodate these requests if we install a new third flagpole at really a moderate cost at the South Courtyard at the Civic Center. And the proposal is really to follow the lead of the region. And what we're proposing is that the whole community flag raising process be administered through your office. So that's the proposal. And Mr. Clerk and the Director of Communications, again, the ones who have done the heavy lifting are probably best positioned to answer questions, but I can answer questions too.
Thank you. Mr. CAO, did you have a comment or a question?
I actually did, Madam Mayor, if I may.
Please go ahead.
So one of the things that we have prided ourselves on over the years, and particularly in this term of council, is being a character community and really being respectful and honoring and diversity and inclusion. And part of the of this policy was we've had some discussion in the chambers up till now, and this matter could get very complex very quickly. And we like to keep things simple in the East Gwillimbury. I at one point saw policies that certain municipalities have that almost had a proclamation a day, if not two a day. I saw a proposed flag raising policy that was 6 pages long. And, those to me weren't ideal. And so we're trying to keep it simple. A non-proclamation community, unless otherwise deemed so by council. The flags to be a policy to follow the York Region lead. Well, essentially the York Region doesn't fly a lot of flags. And that's the fact of the matter. Over the last several months, we've had issues of not maybe raising flags, but it's been lowering flags as well, and it's been administered through your office, through Council's EA. And so the thought was to take our award-winning accessibility entrance and install a third flagpole there, which could honor many different types of uses. We could have some fun with it. One of the things I was thinking is if the EG sports team won a significant tournament or event, we may be able to fly the Eagle flag or the figure skating flag. If the Toronto Maple Leafs ever won the Stanley Cup or even a playoff series, we may be able to fly the Leaf flag up there. And I don't say that in jest, but it's something I think we could have a little bit of fun with. As far as the other flags would be raised, there was some discussion about certainly including, as required, the diversity committee, who really has a fingerprint on this. But there are some thoughts that maybe some other committees may, from time to time, also need some input into some decisions being made if there's accessibility or maybe environmental initiatives that may also want to be considered. So I just wanted to provide a little context, Madam Mayor. We've spent a bit of time talking about this over the last several weeks. So just some opening comments before council can ask some detailed questions or provide some comments.
Thank you. There, I'm unmuted. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Webster. I have to congratulate Councillor Crothers. If it wasn't for the diversity committee and the desire for the municipality to have the pride flag fly, we wouldn't have a third flagpole discussion today. And I think that's exactly what this was all about, was making sure that we were inclusive. And it may be for seniors events, as Mr. Webster has indicated, even to the point of hockey teams and things that are happening globally. It's a flagpole that doesn't have quite the same restrictions as one on the front lawn or two on the front lawn, that we have to take our Canada flag down or our town flag to put something up. This is going to be an opportunity where we can share with our community the special things that are happening around. It may be Lions Club, it may be an anniversary of a service club, or whatever the case may be. But I think this is a brilliant idea for us to speak to our community. So thank you very much, Mr. Webster, and all of the staff that have trying to find how. I listened to what council had to say and trying to find some place where we could make it happen. So I think it's a great idea. Now, are there questions from members of Councillor Crothers first, please?
Thank you, and thank you for pushing ahead with this. It's something that was one of the very first ideas that came out of the Diversity Committee to really demonstrate the town's commitment to diversity and inclusion. So I can't agree more about proclamations, that time spent debating proclamations and what actually is accomplished with a proclamation is it's just not equal to raising a flag, which is a visible demonstration that shows we're a welcoming community. And I think we will be able to do that in a way that we've seen in some of our neighbors, like Bradford, when they raise community or Cultural Heritage Month flags and the celebrations they have around that. It really brings a nice flavor to the town. So I thank you for pushing for this and seeing this through. The committee will be happy with this. I agree with keeping it just in the mayor's office. I wouldn't want our monthly meetings changed into an arm wrestle over what flag we're going to fly this month. So I appreciate that. I would ask, though, that we just add that to notify council of the requests that are received, especially the first year, particularly, so we can get an understanding of what's coming forward, what's being turned down, even. So just so we have an idea of what's happening, just for transparency. So I would ask that be part of our resolution. And also, the only disappointment I have in this is that the Diversity Committee had asked to be part of developing this protocol, and as an advisory committee, their advice into this, I think, would have been an important part. So I would ask also that we add something to the resolution that speaks to reaching out to the committee, not for approval, but just for background information when requests come in, so that we don't end up inadvertently flying a flag that might have different connotations than what seems to be on the surface. So I would ask that we add something to the resolution about reaching out to either the Diversity Committee or another appropriate committee, because like was said, it could be something to do with the Environment Committee or Economic Development or something like that, for background information. So I want to be clear that we're not about to bring in an advisory committee to yay or nay these, but just to make sure that they are being reached out to and included in the process, because it's an area they have strong expertise in.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to go along with Councillor Crothers and her thought process there. I think the fact that different requests could be sent out to different advisory committees that may be their area of expertise sounds like a great idea. And I'm going to kind of step out on a limb here with another comment to do with this report. And I in no way want this to sound bad or argumentative. But the line that says staff proposed that the pride flag be flown for the entire month of June on the new flagpole. I have no issues with flying that flag. I have no issues with the protocol of when it should be raised and that type of thing. I think though that we are handcuffing ourselves by saying that we'll fly that flag exclusively for the whole month of June. And my thought process there is that what if we're approached by something else that may be going on within that month of June? And then we have to say to them, sorry, we can't fly your flag this month because our protocol says the whole month is has another flag flying. So I'm wondering if there should be something written into the resolution that says that, again, that the mayor's office reserves the right to make that change if required. And my thought process is, I mean, there's a million examples out there. Maybe we get something from the Legion that says, you know, on the third weekend of June, you're going to do this, and we'd like you to fly this flag. I'll even step out a little bit further and say that I don't think we're being all that inclusive if we have to tell someone no, because we've already committed to something else. So I'm just wondering if there could be a situation where, and Councillor Crothers and I talked about this, maybe there's a situation where the flag is flying and we take down the rainbow flag for 4 or 5 days and fly the other one that we need to and put that flag back up again for the remainder of the month if possible. I'm just wondering if there's a way that we can write that in so that it gives latitude to the mayor's office to do that.
Thank you, Councillor Foster. Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to support Councillor Foster's point. I think we may even have had a similar issue this month alone. June 21st is Indigenous Day, and so how would we have addressed that other than finding a respectful way to, you know, during Pride Week, the flag is flown, and then there are other equally important days and other things that that the mayor may wish to recognize. So I think giving some flexibility to the mayor's office, while the report says that it's going to be flown for the entire month, I'm fine with the resolution as presented because it says that that council is delegating to the office of the mayor the authority to carry out the necessary requirements for any requests, and so that gives her the latitude. To Councillor Carruthers' point, perhaps we could add a clause that says that the Diversity and Inclusion Advisory Committee be considered a resource in addressing requests for recognition. And that would give the committee that standing and recognition of their expertise if the mayor's office should need to touch base with that committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions, comments? Councillor Crothers.
I'm wondering if we could say starting June 1st rather than the entire month of June. I think that captures what my colleagues are saying. And I worked with the clerk's office to come up with some language to capture some of the comments that I made. And I was wondering if we want to look at those as possible motions here. Amendments, that's the word I was looking for.
Yes.
Sometimes the word just slips, right?
So the first one is with notification to council members of all requests. I think that's a given, but we can certainly add that in. I would want, before a flag goes up, I would want every member of council to know that that we're contemplating putting this a particular flag up. I think that we all are in different corners of the community some days and working with different groups. So you want to make sure that somebody doesn't ask you about what's that flag up there and you don't know what it is or what it represents. So I think that's very important to have. And when a request is received from an organization that does not align with the region's policy, that I am able to seek input from council advisory committees. And I think there's the environmental one. I'm thinking June is Seniors Month. Is there something that we want to work with the Seniors Task Force or Committee? There may be schools that have some kind of award system that we work with them. So I think wherever we can get the best input, that's really important. And in most cases, if it should be an organization that is in the town and doing good work with us. That's why they want a flag. However, if it's not, then we need to do research on them to make sure that before it ever goes anywhere, the research would be expected prior to that. I've noticed of late that there's not as many flags going up on flag poles or changing them. Doesn't seem to be that organizations have the same number of flags that they did even 5 or 6 years ago, when you used to see a number of letters that came in requesting a variety of in most cases were volunteer organizations that were having campaigns or whatever for the month. So that's kind of my take on it. I'm just wondering, so we have that a request is received from an organization that does not align with the region's policy. The Office of the Mayor may seek input from the council advisory committees as required. I'm fine with that. I think that would, it's probably a given, but it's nice to have it within the motion as well.
If I may, yes. I just want to speak to that. We know that you would reach out. We know that. But when we write policy, we have to think of the future and a future mayor who might not want to reach out. So that's why I wanted to make sure that was in there, to make sure that we had something to point to. We had a mayor who was putting up inappropriate flags, that we could point to something to say, hey, can you reach out to some of your advisory committees? So not at all directed toward this mayor who does this so naturally. And I just also want to stress that I asked for notification to council members for all requests, because I think it's important for us to know what's coming in and what we're saying no to, as well as what we're saying yes to. And again, like I said, just for the first year or so, just so we get an idea of how this is being received. I think that's important. So thank you very much.
Good. Thank you.
I can move that. If you'd like.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Crone. Are there any other questions? Councillor Morton? I can't see your hand. Okay, we're fine then. All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. We're at corporate services. We have no reports at this time from corporate services. Mr. Velchik, would you like to provide any information today?
Madam Mayor, I've got nothing further to add at this point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We'll move to item K, Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services. Mr. Molinari.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. We have a number of reports today. The first one deals with the assumption of phase 2 and 3 of Crystal Homes development. And it basically provides for infrastructure for 193 lots south of Harvest Hills Boulevard. All the infrastructure is within phase 2 and 3 has been inspected and is all ready to be assumed. And I just wanted to bring to council's attention that that we do have, we are holding about $200,000 for the building department related to some unfinished minor works on the building front that needs to be addressed. So once those works are completed, they will be able to release the final $200,000 as well. So we're just looking for approval to move forward with the assumption of those 2 phases of the Crystal Homes development.
Thank you very much. Are there questions of Mr. Molinari? I have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Crone, Councillor Crothers, you have a question, Councillor Crothers, or you're making the motion? Thank you. And Councillor Crone. All those in favor? And that's carried. Item number 2, Mr. Molinari.
Yeah, the second item is a joint report with corporate services, and hopefully it turns into a good news story for if we're successful with a grant with FCM. So essentially, it's work for asset management projects that builds on works that are currently underway in the town. So we have two capital projects that are in the queue. And if successful with this project, we would be able to offset $50,000 of the current project award to offset some of those works. So essentially, it gives us $50,000 that we've already committed from our own capital budget.
Very nice. When is the deadline for awarding?
I believe we've got another month or two, but oftentimes this is on a first come first served basis. So we're looking to expedite this as soon as we can. So on the heels of today's meeting, we'll be following up to make the necessary arrangements and get the application in.
Very good. Thank you. I have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Roy DiClemente, Councillor Foster. Are there any questions? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. There is a second resolution that requires a mover and a seconder as well on this application. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Persichini, Councillor Crothers. Any questions on this one? All those in favor? And that's carried. And item number 3, Mr. Molinari.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. The third item is a memorandum dealing with the Mosaic Homes topsoil stockpile. And just wanted to let council know that we did reach out to Mosaic Homes, and I'm pleased to advise that they've agreed to reshape the pile, take some of the top of it off, and make that pile a little more aesthetic for the adjacent residents. They're proposing to have that work completed by the end of July.
Oh, wow. It's been a long haul, hasn't it? Better done than not at all, but it seems like we've been talking about this pile of dirt for a long time. Could I have a mover and a seconder? Councillor Crothers, Councillor Foster. I guess I just have one question, Mr. Molinari. This is the first time that I've ever seen this kind of storage take place, and I would say lack of respect for the residents that are on that street in particular. Do we have anything in our toolbox that perhaps another time we would be able to deal with this prior to the residents coming to us? Is there something in our standards that might make a difference?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, we're certainly looking at updating our standards to put some bookends on this. It is quite a balancing act, though, because the stockpile needs to go on the last available lots that are going to be produced or that are going to be built in that development. So you don't want to be moving them around, and at the same time, you don't want the footprint of that stockpile to be so large that it's preventing them from developing the lots. So that's kind of why they in many cases they try to go narrow and high. But I think the point of council is well taken, in that we'll try and set some limits on the heights of those stockpiles so that they're not as high as they are in this particular case.
Go ahead, Councillor Roy DiClemente, then I will have another comment. Go ahead.
Thank you. This is something that residents on Hackett Street have been engaging with me quite heavily on. And while this is a bit of a compromise, I would hesitate to say that this will be satisfactory to them. And I wouldn't be surprised if Mosaic were the builder on Hackett Street, that our circumstances would be very different. But we've got two different builders adjacent to each other, and so there's created some unwelcome conflict here. And like I said, it's a compromise, but I don't think that we've heard the end of this, to be honest. And if it were me, I certainly wouldn't be satisfied with it in the least. I would want that topsoil gone, but I understand the limitations of how we got here and the challenges in trying to get away from this. But it's not pleasant. The people on Hackett Street have been living there for 3 years already. So they've been dealing with this for 3 years, and we're talking with no end in sight. We haven't given them a date other than, well, at the end of July, the pile will be lower, and rather than it's gone. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Roy DiClemente. I guess my point would be that, you know, we have said that it needs to be there for the last houses that are built, but unfortunately, it was also there for the first houses that were built. And so it's a conflict in itself on how we handle this. And I don't know if we have the ability to restrict them on where they actually place it. Do we have the ability to say you cannot do it here because these houses by another builder are already occupied? I think that's the problem in a nutshell, is that these people were one of the first ones moving in, and that pile is going to be there until the last ones move in. So I'm just hoping that somehow we've learned from this one. It doesn't help the people on Hackett, but somehow we're going to still be building a lot of houses and a lot of developers that are still coming through the door. Perhaps this is one that should go in the book on how can we do it differently, or can we prohibit this at another time. So thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and I think both yourself, Councillor Roy DiClemente, and Mr. Molinari have said it right. I mean, you know, we understand the developer wants to save topsoil from the area to be reused. I guess it just depends on how long it lays around and sits there. But I think the one thing that keeps coming to mind when I think about this is I think that although we can look at our regulations and our protocols on how this is going to be done, we've got to be careful not to make it too difficult, because the more that the developer has to move this stuff around, it costs a lot of money, and it puts all that traffic on the road. And the final part of this is going to be that cost is going to be passed on to the homeowner or the new home buyer. And you know, we talk about affordable housing and making it affordable as we can. I think we just need to be careful that we don't make our rules so strict that we're adding a cost onto that. Thanks.
Point well taken. Thank you. Any other questions, comments? All in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you very much. Item number 4, Community Infrastructure and Environmental Services, former Overholt Pit, site alteration update 18725 McCowan Road, Rice Commercial Group.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. So on this particular application, the applicant has prepared a film management plan, an updated film management plan. And I know that the community's been asking staff for a copy of that for some time. And so before we released it, what we wanted to do is just come to council and say that draft plan is available now. It has been reviewed by the town's peer review consultant. It obviously hasn't come to council, but what we're proposing, it's a fairly thick document. So what we were proposing was that we would put a big draft on watermark on the front of it, and with a caveat that the council has not approved this particular application. and get it out to the public so that they can review the application and provide some feedback. Then in the fall, we can have Rice Group come and provide a presentation that overviews the film management plan, the comments received, and maybe at that point be able to give them some direction either way on things that council and the public like and things that they don't like, and maybe some direction in that regard.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Crone?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you to General Manager Molinari. I would hope that when we set a date in the fall that we'll be notifying all the concerned citizens that have expressed interest in this issue, that we'll be notifying them of the meeting. Will that be the case?
Yeah, through you, Madam Mayor, absolutely. We have a pretty long list of stakeholders and email addresses for many people in that area. So we'll be sending out notification for all those meetings for that are being attended. We'll send out notification to all those residents and stakeholders that meeting is happening.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Mr. Molinari, I know at the meetings that we had in the council chamber, there were concerns that not necessarily were in regard to the Jackson pit, but also other areas around there that are doing hauling as well. Have we been able to determine what is really happening with some of the other ones, and is there any ability to alter some of the agreements that they have going forward?
Well, there are some extraction sites that are not far away from the applicant. Those are being managed through the MNR, and we don't really have a lot of pull with respect to that. But what we can do is observe their truck traffic. And depending on the type of radar board that we use, we talked previously about potentially getting the photo radar, not for issuing tickets, but for getting license plates of potential trucks. And then from that, we'd be able to determine if that truck was associated with the rice pit or any other pit in that area. We'd be able to say this is the truck that we were having trouble with, and pass that on to the operators who are responsible for that truck. And I think by that targeted approach, we can probably deal with some of these other locations that may not actually be under our jurisdiction.
Thank you. Appreciate that very much. It's really hard to talk about one issue when there are two or more issues that are impacting in the community as well, and we're not really quite sure exactly what's going on. So thank you. I think your suggestions are well taken. Any questions, comments? I have a mover and a seconder, please. Councillor Crone, Councillor Crothers, all those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. Is there anything else, Mr. Molinari, at this time?
Nothing further at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're at Community Parks, Recreation and Culture with Mr. Karmazin. You with us?
Yeah.
Mr. Karmazin?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Madam Mayor, members of council. The report that we've prepared today is an update on the Health and Active Living Plaza project. The HELP, otherwise known as the HELP, is one of the largest projects in the history of the town, expanding and enhancing parks and recreation core service delivery, as well as convenient and complementary services with several partnerships at central location in Queensville. At the request of council, this report provides a detailed capital and operating financial plan, facility fit metrics from our public, outreach and consulting sessions and processes, recommendations to continue the design work, including the park and outdoor space, And most importantly, design adjustments and considerations in response to COVID-19. We have provided a significant list of known considerations, and this will continue to evolve. So as we move forward with the project, staff and the consulting team will continue to closely monitor design trends, best practices, in particular in response to COVID-19, and will remain flexible and continue to update Council routinely on how these trends and best practices may adjust or will adjust over time our design work. Myself and our team are available to answer any questions that Council may have at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Questions of Mr. Karmazin? Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. One of the things that I wanted to speak to was sort of under the section in the report about placemaking and partnerships. There's a reference to the public art and some of those opportunities, and I think there needs to be a bit of a clearer distinction for us. There's one aspect of it which is the public art, and that's the large scale placemaking pieces that are permanent parts of permanent fixtures in the facility or around the facility. And the second part is that ability to have flexible exhibit or gallery space that allows for programming, shows, or things like that. For example, the Arts and Culture Advisory Committee might want to support local artists by mounting an art show and sale, or the library may want to do an exhibit, or perhaps the Sharon Temple has a traveling exhibit of some of their artifacts. There needs to be a facility or a function within the facility to program that space. So I think we need to be a little bit more clear about those two uses and those two parts or aspects of public art in the facility. And I look forward to hearing about it as we continue to move forward with more detailed design. But I just wanted to make note of that on behalf of the committee that I am liaison to, and just as part of my own interest as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Crothers.
Thanks. Thank you for this report, and thank you, General Manager Karmazin, for the lengthy conversation that we had about my concerns with moving forward at this time. We all know the past 3.5 months, we've seen tremendous change in our society. Anywhere you go, things have changed. Our public facilities have been shut down for months. Businesses are going to tremendous expenses to be retrofit for the post-COVID world. We know that throughout human history, major changes to the use of public spaces have occurred after every single pandemic that we've seen. And it's just important to be mindful of this as we move forward, that major changes to public spaces will occur after this pandemic. There's no doubt about this. And we just want to make sure that we are designing our building with that in mind. 6 weeks ago, we had a presentation from the architects that had no reference at all to COVID. And, when I talked with General Manager Karmazin, he was saying, well, 6 weeks ago, we didn't really know a lot about how things are changing. So I say to you, think about what 2 months from now will be like, 3 months from now. I would like for council to be looking at delaying moving forward on detailed design until the fall when we have more information. I know that we can make changes throughout the detailed design process, but there's going to be expenses with that. And making changes on top of other changes, we're going to end up with some sort of Frankenstein or Frankenstein's monster, I guess is more appropriate, if we keep adding changes on. And we just have to look to our upper tier municipality. York Region built that beautiful addition, and now they're going through all these retrofits. And I'm sure if they could start from scratch, it would be less expensive, and they'd be able to build it to exactly what's needed. As a cautionary tale, 15 years ago when I started as a trustee, we were building a high school. And one of the suggestions I had said was, kids are bringing their cell phones to school. They need places to charge them. We need to be putting in more outlets. And it was too far along the design process to go back and retrofit to add more outlets. when the school opened, on our very first visit, there was extension cords everywhere as people were trying to charge things. And that's a fire hazard, and it had to be all retrofit. So I think that we have to keep in mind we're planning for the future, and we have this learning that's coming to us as we come out of this pandemic. The research has already been done. Every week we're seeing something new, some new learning. And so I'm just thinking that we need to be very considerate. You know, our job is risk management, so we're balancing the risk of what happens to a 2-3 month delay versus what happens to moving ahead without all the information of what the post-COVID world looks like, what the community needs are post-COVID. We know that the risk of delay is could be timing, but we don't need to go to detailed design until 2023. Sorry, we don't need to go to tender till 2023. Detailed design only takes a year, so we've got 3 years to do 1 year's worth of work. I don't see how a 2-month delay would be significant in that. And the risk of penalties for delaying with our architectural firm, well, I'd like to think we're dealing with some professionals who would look at us being in a current state of emergency and respect that without imposing financial penalties. So I just think that it's our responsibility, particularly with this large amount of taxpayers' money, to do our due diligence and see what the fall looks like, and see what the post-COVID, post-state of emergency world looks like before committing these large amount of dollars. That said, I'm very much in favor of the project. I just want us to be cautious in moving ahead in unprecedented times. So I just want to be clear on my support for the project in general.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Councillor Persichini.
Madam Mayor, and to all our colleagues there, if we could put a clause in there of such a way that that we could change the design and upon the changes of the COVID-19, could you know, as Councilor Crowder says, I would be okay with it as long as we put a clause that protects us, that we could anytime do some changes or alteration and not cost involved. Then we can move forward. That's my suggestion. I'm sure next time we'll explain a little more detail if I may. Can you kind of give us an idea if we could put those clauses in there, General Manager?
Through you, Madam Mayor, it is possible to report back at certain milestones as the design progresses, specific to any modifications or adaptations to the design specific to COVID-19. We do have a significant amount of flexibility as we move forward through the design process to make adjustments to the design work to reflect any of the changes that are required at this point for COVID-19. I should point out that the Ontario Building Code has not changed. Legislation, the Health Promotions and Protections Act, has not changed. But there are significant design considerations as we're moving forward to address COVID-19, and that will continue. And that will, to Councillor Crowther's point, that will continue to evolve, and it's incumbent upon staff to report out to council as this design progresses to do our due diligence and incorporate those design considerations as we move forward. So I'd be happy to suggest some wording to amend the recommendation and the resolution to reflect, you know, a routine check-in with regards to COVID-19 and on how the design will be adapted over time in response to COVID.
Thank you.
That's what I was getting to. That's what I was trying to say. Thank you for covering that area. As long as there's no additional cost involved, I'm okay with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Persichini. Councillor Crone.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This has been an interesting debate point. I certainly want us to be prudent and responsible with taxpayers' dollars moving forward, certainly at this time that we're in. I'm very mindful of the fact that I think the federal government, the provincial government will in the coming months want to kickstart the economy, and one of the ways, the surefire ways that they always use, is infrastructure funding. And I know they'll be looking for things that are shovel ready, that haven't been pre-planned, and I want to make sure that we can take advantage of some very attractively priced financing opportunity. So I'm struggling with how to go on this, but maybe Mr. Karmazin, you could tell me, are you aware of any projects that are currently underway or about to be underway that have had to go through a bit of retooling to deal with post-COVID-19 world? Is there someone that's maybe in a similar situation as us, but maybe a few steps ahead? And would you have any knowledge of how they're dealing with it? Not a fair question to ask you on the spot, but I was just curious if you knew off the top of your head.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to my knowledge, there are a number of projects that are in their design phases, and I think they are all taking into consideration what some of the changes may be with regards to COVID-19 and how to adapt, whether it be architecturally, structurally, mechanically, and electrically, their individual respective designs. I don't know of any projects to date through my municipal counterparts that have been shelved in response to COVID-19 at this point. But that, again, that's just my own personal anecdotal knowledge of with regards to the industry. I can say that there is a number of design considerations, best practices that all fall within the universal design standards under the Ontario Building Code. And we do have the flexibility through the detailed design process to make changes. Absolutely. Changes are made all the time. I'll give you an example. If stuff comes in over budget, we value engineer. If we need to make changes, we can re-engineer and can make adjustments. And we do have an excellent architect that is very flexible and very willing to work with us in that regard. So that's sort of my comment as sort of a professional opinion on making changes through this process, and having having had built a number of facilities over the past 2 decades, and knowing this process and how to work with architects and adjust changes and possible scopes of work as we move forward.
I have Councillor Persichini again, and then Councillor Crothers. Go ahead, Councillor Persichini. You're muted.
The new building on Woodbine, do we have to be concerned about COVID-19 too? The ones we're building on, in the big building on Woodbine now, the general manager, is that going to be affected us the same way? Just a question. And the next question I would have, maybe we could check with the Ontario government if there's going to be any changes on how we build things in the near future. If there's some regulations of governing us under the COVID-19 that's going to be happening, if we should check into the Ontario government to see if there is something going to be coming up regarding these regulations of COVID-19 and what's going to be happening, so we can sort of plan our strategy. Anyway, two different things.
Thank you. Mr. Karmazin?
Through you, Madam Mayor, with regards to the Operations Center on Woodbine, we are looking at some physical adaptations to the workspaces that can be applied to the existing facility design and construction, again, under the current Ontario Building Code. An example is we have a frontward-facing service desk. So we install plexiglass shielding at that location, and that would be an example of a physical adaptation to an existing facility. And we're doing that at all of our facilities where we have service desks or circulation desks, such as the Civic Center, our library locations, the sports complex. So we are adapting our existing facilities, and that would be considered an existing facility because it's currently under construction. With regards to the Ontario Building Code and any changes to the code and amendments, and in this case, with this facility, the Health Promotions and Protections Act, we're closely monitoring that with our counterparts, our CBO, our building inspectors, our plans examiners, to stay apprised of any amendments as we move forward. And in particular, the architectural team, it's their role as well to keep abreast of any amendments to the building code as well with the design.
Thank you very much. That makes me sleep better at night time now. Thank you.
Councillor Crothers.
Thank you. And just to be clear, I am in no means suggesting we shelve this by any means. I'm asking us just to pause and take a breath while we find out about what changes are coming. We know that building codes take years to change. There will not be building code changes in the fall, but there will be new research. We're seeing new research every single week as something new is coming out on this. And I do believe with a building that is this large, we have to have sound practices that are research-based, evidence-based practices, and that evidence, that research about what the post-COVID world is going to be like is just not there right now. To Councillor Crone's point about making changes, I can tell you that the huge cost of retrofitting a dental office, for instance, if you were building a dental office to the standards that were in place in March, building code hasn't changed, but it would be a much different building you would build right now than you would have built back then. And I believe that if you were building it in the fall, you'd have even more information. And we just have to look to York Region. Want to talk about projects that York Region's new addition that they put in and the money they're going to retrofit, that is a prime example. As for the infrastructure funding, something that we've talked about, shovel-ready projects. The problem, I mean, it sounds great. Let's get this shovel-ready so if there's grant money, we can take advantage of it. But are we not still tied to the 40,000 threshold? As Councillor Foster said to me, well, we hit 40,000 sooner if we approve this today. So we're still working towards that 40,000 threshold. So if there's infrastructure money available in January, I don't know how we take advantage of it when we're not going to be able to build for 3 years. So I'm not really sure that quick access to infrastructure money is going to help us. I think that access to infrastructure money in a year from now would be more in tune to what we're thinking about. And I think that pausing for a couple of months will still get us to be able to get us to a place where we can take advantage of that. So again, not shelving, just taking a pause, and maybe that's something that we can work into the agreement so that it doesn't look like a pause, that we can approve these amounts, but asking that the architects start the work in the fall once we have more research on what public spaces are going to look like moving forward.
Thank you. Councillor Roy DiClemente.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This project has been something that, while we talk about the 40,000 threshold, we still have 33,000 people who are here right now who wanted this built yesterday. And this is a project that has been, I've been working on it for 10 years. I know others have been working on it even longer, but my sense is that this project has some momentum, that waiting until the fall doesn't necessarily gain us anything other than we lose more time on this project. And I would suggest that we might also lose some money on it as well if we delay. Madam Mayor, through you to Mr. Karmazin, the RFP that we have with the architect, I would imagine that it assigns some timelines. We've got a contract with the architect to do the work for us. they've been mobilized. They've got staff assigned to us and expertise assigned to us. Delaying this, I would imagine, has some implications. Perhaps you could outline what those implications might be, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, there could be certainly beyond the window of taking a pause, there could be additional delay. An example would be of that would be disengaging and demobilizing the project management team, the architect and all the engineers. When you go to restart, if those individuals are on other projects, then there might be a delay, or there might be a lack of continuity with the project team that gets reassigned to the project. That's a possibility. There is the standard architectural form document does have clauses where if you do delay unnecessarily, then there could be some penalty clauses with regards to that. So those are a couple of examples where the town could be exposed, and there. In addition to that, there is momentum with the project at this point in time. We are proceeding and working with a very good and favorable relationship with a good architectural firm that is fully apprised of the trends moving forward with regards to the pandemic and prevention yeah. So that's sort of the comments with regards to any potential delay and any potential exposure.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor, the report also requests an amount to be approved so that we can do some additional background studies. Are those studies that are relying on seasonal work being done? So if you're doing soil tests, I can imagine that if you ended up waiting until the fall to do those tests, you might have frozen ground and then you would lose more time. Is that also the case? I know that's happened in other circumstances. Would that also be, maybe you could speak to that a little bit more, please?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there are background studies and tests that we are required to do if we do move forward. Some of those tests are seasonal tests. For example, measuring groundwater, hydrology, hydrogeology is typically done over the course of a year. If you delay that, you are pushing that out into perhaps the next spring and summer session to take a look at your groundwater and your hydrogeology and hydrology. So that would be an example of a further delay that could be incurred if we were to push out and take a pause.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know others want to make a comment, but having worked with Mr. Karmazin and Mr. Catania for as long as they've been with the town, I would certainly not suggest that they would ever be doing something that was reckless or irresponsible. And I would be. I think we literally, if we were to delay things, that we don't have anything to gain, but only time and money to lose. So I'm happy to proceed, but obviously there are other people who would like to comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have Councillor Persichini again, and I have Councillor Foster. Go ahead, Councillor Persichini. You're on mute.
I would move a motion that we go ahead with this, and as long as we protect ourselves, that we can do any changes to the architect and no additional cost. I would agree fully with Tara. And we move forward to this thing here. So that's my take. And thanks for all the inside information, Tara, and also the general manager. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a comment more than anything. I've been skating right down the middle on this one. I see the points on both sides of it, and I kind of wasn't sure which way I was going to go here. I see the common sense in both sides of this. I think we've come to a point here where, you know, I was just thinking to myself, we could probably delay this for 2 years and we may still be looking at stuff that's coming out of the COVID-19 and whether we're doing things right or wrong. I think at this point we probably have to trust our staff, and Mr. Karmazin made a good point by saying that you know, the ability to keep reporting on anything to do with COVID-19 that he and the design team and everybody that may be able to work on at the time. I'm just not sure that we could ever pick a time that we would feel comfortable with this. We've decided that we're going to build this building, and I mean, to make it really simple, we're in too deep to quit now. So I kind of think we move ahead. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Morton, I haven't checked in with you. Councillor Morton? Okay. Councillor Crothers, you had your hand up. Go ahead.
Not to flog a dead horse, I promise this is my last comment. I just wanted clarification on the no additional cost. It's my understanding, like I said, I've overseen a number of buildings like this with a number of high schools that are similar price range. The no additional cost, that to me doesn't sound in line with what my experience is. Certainly small modifications, a good architectural firm will deal with small modifications, but large modifications usually come with a price tag. And so I just want to be clear that there isn't the expectation. I keep hearing Councillor Persicini repeat the no additional cost, and that's just not my experience. So I just want to get some clarification that we would not have additional costs if we had large changes when new research is released this fall.
Mr. Karmazin?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'll give you an example of the current adaptations that were represented in the report come at no additional cost. So the architect and the design team is designing to the building code and considering many different COVID-19 adaptations to the design at absolutely no additional cost. As we report back throughout the design process, if there is significant changes in the scope of work, it's our jobs to report back to council immediately if there are any cost implications, and that's our job as staff. So we've been given an existing budget to work with. The architects have an existing design contract. We are making many modifications with regards to COVID-19, and it's, again, incumbent upon us to report back to council should we be presented with any scope change and additional cost. So I would be happy to, again, add that into the resolution, routine reporting on COVID-19, and any potential additional costs if they're ever presented to staff.
Thank you. I just wanted clarity on that because I know if there is substantial changes, there is a cost incurred. Madam Mayor, if I could ask to have a divided motion on this, because I would like to vote in favor of receipt and also of the report, the review of options for light fitness. I'd like to vote in favor of those, but I won't be supporting the spending of extra money since we're in a state of emergency. Thank you.
So what you're asking then is clause 1 and 3?
Together, and then the other two together. That's fine by me.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm not sure that we've finished discussion yet. I'll check that.
You said this would be my last comment, so I just want to get that in, and then I won't comment any more further.
Councillor Roy DeClemente.
Just a request for a recorded vote, please.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions at this time? I do recall that Councillor Persicini, and the last time he spoke, said that he was prepared to move it. And Councillor Roy DeClemente?
happy to move all 4 clauses. If they're being separated into 2 motions, I'm happy to make those as well, or second, whichever it is.
Okay. Councillor Persicini, you're still prepared to move the motion?
Yes, I am.
Thank you very much. So we have Councillor Persicini moving it and Councillor Roy DiClemente seconding the motions, and I will go through, oh, no, it's a recorded vote. So we'll have our clerk conduct the recorded vote, and I'm wondering, Mr. Lamanna, if you can break it into the four sections with each vote, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe I heard that we're splitting out clause 1 and clause 3 together.
Correct.
And the other 2. Okay. So just for everybody's interest, I'll read out clause 1 and 3. So clause 1 reads, be it resolved that Community Parks, Recreation, and Culture Facilities Branch Report CPRC 2020-08 dated June 23rd, 2020, entitled Health and Active Living Plaza Update be received. And the third clause, that Council direct staff to review options for light fitness, including a request for proposal for potential contracted light fitness services at the Health and Active Living Plaza as per public outreach and consulting, and further report back to Council. Councillor DiClemente, you requested a recorded vote. How do you vote on those 2 clauses?
Yes.
Councillor Crothers, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Crone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Foster, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mayor Hackson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Morton, how do you vote? Councillor Morton, how do you vote? I believe Councillor Morton's on mute. We'll go back to her. Councillor Persicini, how do you vote?
Definitely yes.
And I'll circle back. Councillor Morton, how do you vote? Councillor Morton, one more time.
I think she is muted. I'm wondering if we can remind her to take it off of mute.
Okay, we'll ask Tar to text her. We'll move on though. We have that motion has been received, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
So then we'll move to clause 2 and 4, and I'll read them for the record as well. So be it resolved that Council endorse the Health and Active Living Plaza concept design and authorize staff to proceed to detailed design with MJMA and approve an additional amount of $107,000 excluding taxes to include background studies and reports. And the 4th clause, that Council approve the award of landscape architectural services to Landscape Planning Limited as a sub-consultant to MJMA Architects, and Council approve the Parks Development Charge funded budget of $244,725 excluding taxes. Councillor DiClemente asked for a recorded vote. How do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Crothers, how do you vote?
No.
Councillor Crone, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Foster, how do you vote?
Yes.
Mayor Hackson, how do you vote?
Yes.
Councillor Morton, how do you vote? Councillor Morton? Moving on, Councillor Persicini, how do you vote?
Yes.
And circling back, Councillor Morton, how do you vote? You're still having technical issues. So that motion has carried, Madam Mayor. Back to you.
Thank you very much. We will move to, is there anything else, Mr. Karmazin, in Community Parks, Recreation, and Culture at this time?
Through you, Madam Mayor, nothing at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We'll move to item M, and that's administration with myself in the chair. We have no reports at this time. Is there any information that should be shared at this time, Mr. Webster?
Not at this time, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. We'll move to item N, and that's adoption of minutes. The first minutes we have are from our council meeting on June the 2nd. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Foster, Councillor Persicini, all those in favor? Sorry?
Madam Mayor, I think that that was the meeting that I was not present. I think it's marked on there that I was. That might want to be corrected, and if that's there, of course, I'm not going to move it.
Thank you. And I was seeing your hand up, thinking we had you moving it, and away we go. Okay. Thank you very much. So, Councillor Persicini, you would move this, and Councillor, I saw someone else's hand. Councillor Crothers, all those in favor?
And that's as amended, correct?
As amended.
Thank you.
That's carried. Thank you. The next item we have is correspondence. We have a couple of items on correspondence. The first one is from Kay Miller, Mount Albert Foodland, requesting authorization from the municipality as required under the Liquor Control Board to sell alcohol on statutory holidays in accordance with the chart provided in the correspondence. Any questions on this item? Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Crone, Councillor Foster, all those in favor? And that's carried.
And just for confirmation, Madam Mayor, that is to support the sale of alcohol, correct?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Item number 2 is correspondence from the Honourable S. Clark, dated June 16th, requesting input into the proposed amendments to a place to grow growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. Could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Crothers, Councillor Persicini. Any questions on this item? Councillor Crone, you have a question?
Not so much a question, but a comment. I would suggest someone from staff reach out to the minister and let them know they need to update the records that Mr. Pileggi is no longer our director of planning.
He moved on.
Maybe that was just to make sure that we read through his letter.
Maybe so.
If we were paying attention.
Maybe so. Thank you. Any other questions? All those in favor? And that's carried. Thank you very much. We're down to resolutions. We have a resolution regarding the Cannabis Act licensing issues for the production of cannabis for personal medical consumption. I can read through it if people would like me to. I expect that everyone has, but I can, if you wish me to read through it, I can do that. What is your pleasure?
You don't need to.
Okay, could I have a mover and a seconder, please? Councillor Persicini and Councillor Crone. Questions? Councillor Crothers and then Councillor Roy DeClemente. Go ahead.
Thanks. There's a couple of NTPs in here. I assume those need to be removed about validating. So those should not be part of the motion. Perhaps the clerk can comment.
Could you point us?
Madam Mayor. Sorry, through you, Madam Mayor, that was a draft with regards to the solicitor's comments. So those are not part of the motion. Those are being removed. Thank you.
Okay, so as amended. Thank you.
Councillor Roy DeClemente, please.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. A couple of things that I thought could improve the motion. I would be more comfortable if we had a reference to the fact that the licensees are supposed to, under Health Canada's rules, adhere to municipal bylaws, including our zoning and so on. So noting that they are supposed to follow the rules, and further that not just that there's a safety hazard, I think under clause 7, but that these facilities have not benefited from not had the benefit of inspection under the building code, the fire code, and so on. And I think thirdly that it may be helpful if there's a reference to the town's response and the limited tools in our tool chest. that we have to address this. And I, Madam Mayor, I did raise this with the solicitor and the clerk ahead of time, just to make some suggestions so this didn't come out of left field, because it is challenging to try and wordsmith something at a distance. So I just thought I would raise those points here if we'd like to enhance the resolution with a bit more detail. Thank you.
Through you, Madam Mayor, if I can ask Deputy Clerk Givardi to pull up those proposed suggestions. They were emailed to us in a PDF, so we can put them on the screen so that we can review them together. Thank you.
It may take her a minute or two to do so. We could just...
Perhaps I can do it from here then. Hang on one second.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, my phone just died for some reason or other. Can you hear me now?
We can, and we missed you. I just wanted you to know that.
Thank you. I did send an email saying I was in favor of the one thing. I was sent it to Fern, so.
Thank you. Very good.
Sorry, Madam Mayor, I'm just looking for the email.
Okay, so you're going to take it over.
If you want to take some more questions from council, then I'll try to bring it up the email. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Crone, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I wanted to make a suggestion and ask a question. The first suggestion that I wanted to make was I think on the distribution list at the bottom, I would suggest strongly that we add Tony Van Bynen, MP for Newmarket Aurora, as he does speak for some residents of East Gwillimbury and represent some residents of East Gwillimbury in the House of Commons, and he does sit on the government side and probably has more access to the Minister of Health and might be a little more effective in creating some change. The question I had, though, and perhaps staff could fill me in on this, in the motion, it's saying that the town pursue a common front with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities and Association of Municipalities in Ontario and New York Region, seeking that will almost like, I think it was to create a committee, establish a committee of rural municipalities. Is that something that is being put forward by AMO or FCM, or is this was this our idea independently? I just wanted to get some sense of where you're coming from on this particular point.
Madam Mayor, I believe that Solicitor Horner would probably be the best to speak to that matter.
Thank you very much.
Through you, Madam Mayor, frankly, I think it's our own idea. Just in response to council's concern, we're trying to identify meaningful options. Council was very clear that it speaks through its resolutions, and so we were trying to carry that idea forward in the resolution. So, to the extent that we can engage the interest of others and work with others, then we're proposing to do so.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just curious as to the origin of this. You got my hopes up there that there might have been a movement budding already, but oh well, I'll take whatever I can get. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Other questions?
Madam Mayor, I do have that proposed amendment that Councilor Rudy Clemente worked with Solicitor Dean, excuse me, I'll put it up on the screen.
Thank you.
So, can everybody see that now?
Is there anyone that can't see it? Let me know.
Maybe we should read it out for the benefit of Councillor Morton on the phone. And it's challenging to read, but we could get through it. But it may be helpful if we read it aloud, just for those who may not be able to read it.
Sure. So the first clause is, whereas the federal government has enacted the Cannabis Act, created a regimen for the production, possession, distribution, sale of cannabis in Canada for recreational medicinal use, and whereas Health Canada administers a a system of licenses and registrations required for the legal production, possession, distribution, and sale of cannabis in Canada. Or I need to increase in my glasses, aren't so good. Whereas federal licenses issued to commercial cannabis producers compel producers to follow strict criteria that include an obligation to provide an advance notice of commercial production to local municipalities and first responders. And whereas Health Canada issues registrations to individuals for the production of cannabis for personal medicinal consumption. And whereas Health Canada advises personal medical registrants that they are expected to comply with all provincial, territorial, and municipal laws, including local bylaws about zoning, electrical safety, fire safety, together with all related inspections and remediation requirements. And whereas the conditions of medical registration do not require personal producers to provide advance notice of production to local municipalities and first responders, nor are personal producers required to provide evidence of compliance with applicable law. And whereas absent Health Canada requirements of 1, advance notice of cannabis production to municipalities and first responders, and 2, evidence of compliance with applicable law, multiple registrants are consolidating their medical cannabis production at sites located in the town's rural and residential zones where cannabis production is prohibited. And whereas registrants have repurposed existing structures or built greenhouses for the production of cannabis without obtaining building and other required permits, and without required building code and fire code inspections, creating health and safety risks for building occupants and first responders. And whereas prohibited cannabis production in the town's rural residential zone is a nuisance to neighboring residents and the public at large as the result of odor and light pollution associated with unregulated cannabis production. And whereas municipalities have cumbersome enforcement tools that are primarily limited to costly and protracted prosecutions under the Planning Act, Ontario, and the Building Code Act, Ontario. Be it therefore resolved that the Council of the Town of East Gwillimbury respectfully requests that the Federal Minister of Health and Attorney General establish a committee of rural municipalities to work together to propose amendments to the Cannabis Act that will remedy the problems experienced by municipalities as the result of the Cannabis Act and Health Canada's administration of the medical registration regimen, and that town staff pursue a common front with the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario, and the York Region municipalities in seeking amendments to the Cannabis Act that will remedy the problem experienced by municipalities as a result of the Cannabis Act and Health Canada's administration of the medical registration regimen. That this resolution be forwarded to the Honourable Patty Hadu, Minister of Health, Canada, the Honourable David Lamenti, Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada, Christine Elliott, Minister of Health, Ontario, Doug Downey, Attorney General of Ontario, Scott Davidson, MP, York Simcoe, Honourable Carolynne Mulroney, MPP, York Simcoe. I believe I heard we're adding Tony Van Bine to this list as well. Association of Municipalities of Ontario, Federation of Canadian Municipalities, Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, Ontario Association of Fire Chiefs, Municipal Law Enforcement Officers Association, and York Region municipalities.
Well done. Any comments or questions? I'm not seeing any at this time. Thank you very much, staff. It says it all. Certainly for me, it speaks to every question and that I have. And let's hope that the number of people at the end take it as seriously as we do. And the number of associations that I'm sure we're not the only one that have sent correspondence to them, that they step up and include us in any changes that they are proposing, and ask us to be a part of making it happen. Now, did we get a mover for that? I don't recall. Mr. Clerk, did we?
Through Madam Mayor, I'm not sure. I was busy trying to get the email up and I didn't capture if we had anybody.
Okay, well, I'm
happy to move, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Crone, seconded by Councillor Roy DiClemente. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? And that's carried. Councillor Morton?
Yes.
Thank you. That is carried. Item Q, we have 2 bylaws. Is that correct, Mr. Clerk?
That is correct, Madam Mayor.
I'll put them together unless somebody wants them separated. Councillor Persicini? Thank you. Seconded by Councillor Foster. All those in favor?
Yes.
And that's carried. Item R is other business. We do have an electronic meeting on the July 28th, 2020 at 10 a.m. I have been asked to speak. I'm getting feedback, I think. Are other people getting feedback, or am I alone on that? You are. Okay, so I'll try to go through it very quickly. I've been asked in announcing this date that council please block the day because we're not meeting in August and it is the tail end of July. They expect that the agenda might be fairly heavy. If it's not the full day, then you've gained a few hours at the end of it. But the expectation is we may need it. Could I have a motion for that other business, please? Councillor Roy DiClemente, you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to suggest that given that we're all we have pretty open schedules right now due to the pandemic, that if staff need to, if the agenda looks to be super heavy, I'd rather split it up into 2 meetings and meet earlier and introduce a second meeting into July if we need it, than to try and plow through something and not give items their due diligence and the discussion that they deserve. So staff put a lot of time and effort into doing reports for us, and I want to be able to engage with them fully. So if there's an opportunity or a need to split this up and meet earlier, I'm happy to make myself available.
Thank you very much. I'm seeing nodding as well, so I will keep track of this over the next few weeks, and should I get back to you if there is a need to have a second one in July as well. Did I have a move?
As well, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Morton. Moved by Councillor Foster, seconded by Councillor Morton. All those in favor? That's carried. I have a confirming bylaw moved by Councillor Crothers, seconded by Councillor Crone. All those in favor? That's carried. And I have an adjournment moved by Councillor Persicini, seconded by Councillor Foster. All those in favor? And that would be at, my clock is saying 5 o'clock. All those in favor? That's carried. Yep. Thank you very much. We're adjourned.
Thank you.